I think you're imagining things. I don't know why I didn't charge.
12 through 16. Okay, just in item 1, I can just do that. Motion to, okay. Okay. As soon as. Okay. Test. Okay.
Not doing something. I wasn't prepared at all.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Time is now 6 p.m. and we'll call the special city council meeting to order. Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. At this time, we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. Seven council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just get us started tonight. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this special city council meeting to discuss amendments to Chapter 2 of the Fremont Municipal Code. Since taking office as mayor, it's been one of my goals to evaluate how our city council meetings can run smoother, be more professional, and better serve the public. Along with the experience now of running almost 6 months of meetings, I have spent lots of time learning and watching meetings from other cities in Nebraska. This research has been insightful, revealed some deficiencies in our code and ways our meetings can run better for everyone involved. Tonight's meeting is discussion only. No action will be taken. Point of the meeting tonight is to hear the attorney's proposed amendments to Chapter 2, have discussion, and take public comment. So with that being said, I'll now turn it over to our city attorney, Mr. Pat Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. And by way of introduction, a little bit before we get into the meat of this, when we first started representing Fremont, I immediately went through your code, and I'm going to probably address some of what I hope will be the easy issues first, because I immediately have areas where, as I went through your code, that in my handwritten notes say no, absolutely not. But in the same token, I said, hey, we're new at this. We've also had a mayor that's been operating under these rules for 10 years. And it might be a little bit difficult to make some changes. On the other end of that as well is there's more than one way to skin a cat. Who was I to necessarily come in and say that another method might not work as well. But I will say and I've been at this for 27 years and been in front of local public bodies that entire time, probably somewhere between 30 and 50 different local bodies, probably over 400 to 500 meetings in my career. And over that period of time, I would tell you, at least in my opinion, what I thought were to be best practices and ways to move a meeting along and still allow for meaningful public involvement and debate. But as I went through this process, every time, I shouldn't say every time, many times when I was working with attorneys on the other side, would ask me, why does the city of Fremont operate its meetings the way that it does? And I couldn't really answer that question other than that's the way they always did it. And certainly inertia is a difficult thing to move. And you guys very well may say, I'm happy with the way the meetings are moving and how they're conducted. But I think it's my duty as your attorney to tell you what at least I see out there and what I interpret to be best practices and things to move forward. And I think one of the biggest things that I see in this is the length of your meetings. And if we want public involvement, I'm not sure how many people out there in the public necessarily have the stamina to sit through a 4-hour meeting at nighttime. And I think as I've sat here at some meetings, seeing people that wanted to be involved in part of the meeting, but they could tell that it was going to be 3 hours from sitting through the first hour of the meeting that they were going to get to their subject and actually have left. And so the idea here is to try to move things more efficiently along, to make sure that certain things still get accomplished without what I would say beating an issue to death, I guess, for lack of a better term. And some things that I would really like to see changed a little bit differently so that the public does get involved more in the public comment section, and I'll get to that. With that being said, let me try to move forward. There are a couple things in this draft that through communications or otherwise with Travis may not have gotten corrected. How that happened, I guess it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to give you what I think is a little bit different than what's in here that I think would be best practice. And we'll get to those. The first thing that I want to get to is an easy item, which is in the packet that was provided to you, is on the mayor's duties. And that is section 2201. And I'm going to give you, probably start at the other end, the statutes on this.
Motion to approve, receive.
So moved.
Second.
Gibson,
Councilman Ligman. Cast your votes.
Van second. Cast your votes. Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
So in regard to section 2201, that was one of the big no's that I wrote on my code book when I first started doing this. And the main issue here is that the mayor can only have whatever powers are granted to him by statute. And the council cannot enhance them or reduce them. So the statute specifically says the mayor is just the presiding officer at these meetings. But the mayor doesn't have any authority under the statutes to break a tie. That's not what the statute says. So by way of example, if there is a 3-3 vote, and let's say for whatever reason, 2 other council people aren't there, or let's say it's a 4-3 vote. Well, let me try to think about this a little bit. Let's say it's a 3-3 vote. The mayor can't vote to make the fourth vote. Okay, the mayor, if there's, but if there's a 4-3 vote, but there's not a majority, and for some reason this is a particular item like an ordinance that needs a majority of the council, he has authority to vote because he would make the fifth vote. And that's what those two statutes say. So what we did is we took the language out about the council being equally divided, that he has the decisive vote. We changed it specifically to what state statute says. And that simply says when he makes the majority of the council, the fifth vote, he's got a right to vote. And that's the only time he has a right to vote. And for instance, if you had needed a supermajority, like to waive 3 readings, he can't make that 6th vote to waive 3 readings because he's not making the 5th vote, he's making the 6th vote. So that is the change that we've made to section 2201, is just merely to mirror the language of the statute and nothing more. Any questions in that regard?
Councilman Gibson? You're on. Okay, Councilman Yerger?
So just to be clear, you indicated at the onset that we're looking at changes, or you're discussing changes that differ from the material that we were provided before the meeting, because that's not the only change we received to this section. And so the red line that we have that goes beyond that blue line strike, that's not being suggested tonight?
Everything in 2201 is being suggested.
Okay, so the section that says the mayor can vote on ordinances, resolutions, appropriation of money, that is a change. You just didn't discuss it here?
No, again, which will provide the additional vote required to create a number of votes equal to a majority of the number of members. So the first part just says when he's authorized by law, which is essentially taking the first statute I gave you. The second red line that you're seeing mimics the second statute that you've received.
Okay, I may be looking at a different red line than you're discussing, Mr. Sullivan, because
There's two red lines in 2-201. Correct?
there's a strikeout for when his vote counts shall be decisive, whatever that's out. And where the mayor is authorized by law is in.
Correct.
And then after that ongoing sentence, there is a whole section that says the mayor may vote on ordinances, resolutions, and orders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct. You and I have identical copies.
Okay, but you didn't specifically address where that section came from, did you?
It's in the second statute that I gave you.
That's not 312 language as I see it. That's section 16503.
Correct.
I don't
No,
have,
it's 16-312 and 16-404.
okay. I think the language that I'm talking about in the middle of that paragraph comes from 16503, which you didn't give us. So I'm either looking at a different red line or you didn't give us the statutory reference for the section that's in the middle of that paragraph.
Did that come back to you? I'm almost sure that I did. You know, these are for the next. Just a second. $312. Yeah, so actually it's going to be 16-312, 16-404. Give me a minute to back up here. Sorry, I'd be moving a little faster, but I forgot the mouse.
That's okay. Do you actually have copies of the material you said differs from what was apparently put in our packet that we could distribute to council for?
No, I don't. When I was preparing for this meeting, I noticed a couple things that I would say that I would change, and we'll get to that.
This wasn't one of them.
No, this
Okay.
one isn't at all.
So you do see the other red line that I'm talking about that's inherent in the middle of that section?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And I guess my assertion is that comes from 16503 under ordinance resolutions and motions for the appropriation of money on state statute. It's not under mayor's duties under state statute.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, I should have given you 16503 as well. Yeah, hold on just a minute. Well, you should have, no, it's 16312 and 16404.
Okay, and I appreciate you gave us both of those, and I acknowledge those, but the wording in the middle of what you've given us as 2-201 does not come out of those two statutes. It comes out of a different state statute,
And which statute are you looking at?
16503.
Oh, I've got it. It's right here.
And that particular statute specifically addresses contracts, concurrence of majority council required votes for the mayor, et cetera. And I'm just curious as to whether or not I'll make sure that I'm correct here. I'm sorry, you are correct. 404 gives the language that you put in the middle. 16503.
16053 is very similar.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I take back my statement. 404 does include the language that you're putting in. So my question really is slightly different. We're commingling the provisions of one state statute that's dealing with ordinances, resolutions, and orders specifically for the appropriation of money, and putting that into general powers and duties when the city has a municipal code dealing with the same exact language essentially as a category in city code for ordinances, resolutions, et cetera. And we embrace this state statute in that section of city code. So why
Which
would
statute, 503 or 404?
the language that you in 404 subsection 1.
Okay.
And so we have another city code that addresses that same exact, emulates the same exact language.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering why we need to repeat or move that into the section of powers and duties of the mayor when it's already in, how do we handle ordinances, resolutions, and the appropriation of money? And we have the direct language out of state statute already in city code.
Well, I'd have to look at that, but again, why it is mimicking that is because mayor powers and duties seems to be that it was being pulled from essentially 16312. And so in 16312 does not say when you'll be the decisive vote is when the city council is equally divided. So that's where we were correcting that language. Now, with respect to the second part, if there is a section in our code that already addresses the line that we put in there, I don't think it hurts that we've done that, but we'd certainly take a look at it. That's the purpose of this meeting, is to go through that and figure those things out.
Yeah, I
And
appreciate that.
which part of the code are you looking at? 308? 308? Okay.
And let me just clarify for the record, the reason I brought up 16503, it also adds further clarity as to where the mayor's vote counts, and it has to be equal to the majority of the number of members present or the number of elected members of council, which is what you clarified as well. So thank you for doing that. It just was an additional supportive statute for when the mayor can vote.
Okay, any other questions on that? Am I on? Yeah. So again, to me, that's just kind of a cleanup provision. It's not really a big matter of debate or otherwise. I'm just trying to comply with state statute there. The rest of everything else that we'll probably look at is going to be fairly discretionary. Every body has its own right to make up its own rules to the extent permitted by law. And the rest of this is going to be up to you guys, whether you want to adopt them or not. So let's go ahead and back to section 2-103. This one is from what and let me tell you on this one, there's a number of there are a number of ways this is handled. Generally speaking, I will tell you that when you're approving contracts, you're making decisions that don't require public hearings. The purpose of the Open Meetings Act, the purpose of us being a republic, not a democracy, which I think is lost sometimes, is that people are elected to office to make decisions and decide what to do. And I think if people feel passionate about something that they're doing, or they're concerned about a certain contract, they should certainly contact their local representative and say, here's my concerns, and allow that person to utilize that information with respect to that particular item, and develop that in their thoughts to make an informed vote. But from the idea of having every person come in for public comment, if you do that on every item, it gets back to the issue of some items that are actually designed for public hearings may be lost if meetings go on for 4 hours. They can't stick around that long. A lot of people don't just do not have the endurance to sit through a 4-hour meeting. So nevertheless, the purpose of the Open Meetings Act for outside of things that are specifically required. And if we're specifically required to have public hearings by inference, that means that we don't necessarily have to have public comment on every item. It's just the ones that are required by law. With that being said, a city council can decide any way they want. And I'll just give you some examples of how local governments have dealt with it. Many of them don't have a general public comment meeting at all on items that don't require it, unless that body ends up making a motion to open it up for public hearing. And if that body makes a motion over for public hearing, then they'll open it up. But things of a routine nature and so forth, they generally just want to proceed and do their business in front of the public and get it done. Which, by the way, there's one section in here that we'll get to that talks about privileged motions. And I believe part of that would be a privileged motion would be in the middle of a discussion to say, hey, I think this needs the general public to speak. And the council should be able to have a privilege of making a motion to say the public needs to speak on this item. This is too big of an issue for us to just pass without public comment. And we'll get to that section. As far as what other bodies do and handle it, many of them will say, when you come in the door, say, if you want it, we'll have public comment. If you fill out a form and say, I want to speak on item 13 and give you your name, and all that is then passed to the mayor or whoever is the chairman of the meeting at the time. And they'll say, okay, item 13, John Smith wants to speak on this. And they'll call them up and they'll say, John Smith, speak on this. The value of that still is you're getting public comment, yet you're allowing for the meeting to continue to and proceed along without stopping every time for public comment on items that don't require by law public comment. So that's another method to do that. The city of La Vista is one that does that. The city of Omaha used to have public comment until they had a guy, I don't know if you remember him, but there's a guy named RJ Brown that came to every meeting and spoke on every item. City council's got a few items on their agenda. And so their meetings were going extremely long. So they changed their policy on how they're going to handle that. City of Papillion, they ask for public comment just like you do every time. And again, that's your call if you want to do that. But generally speaking, we're having a meeting before the public and discussing business, and as an elected representative, it's my opinion that that's the best way to proceed. You guys can give me comments or otherwise and let me know how you feel about that. Again, the main item is things that are of public importance that are required a public hearing. We want to give people the opportunity to do that. And if a meeting, it lasts so long that people have to leave or not, or otherwise are just dissuaded from even coming here because they don't want to sit through that long of a meeting, you are actually losing public comment instead of gaining it by that process. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Item 2106 is agenda for meetings. This is one that through conversation that I had with Travis, I don't know how we got to this point. I guess it doesn't really matter other than to tell you, I think that the best practice for a consent agenda in particular is that any council member that wants to talk about it can remove it. And if once that council member says remove it, it's removed. There's no vote, there's no nothing, it's removed. And so if somebody says I want item 9 removed, I don't believe that the rest of the council should say, no, I'm going to make a motion, you can't remove it. So that's one area here that this has got a little bit of an error. One of the things that I do in here, though, we refer to the public removing consent agendas. Again, this gets back to the issue that I said before. You're a representative government. If something on that consent agenda is important to a citizen, that person should voice their current concerns to the city councilman, the city administrator, city or the mayor, and request that that gets off that council member gets it off the consent agenda and then discusses it. Any questions on that or comments?
Councilman Yerger.
Yes, based on what you just said about you would not expect the council to vote against taking something off. And if a council member asks to have it off, it's off. Then why is this last sentence in here at all?
That's what I'm saying is, and that's an error, should be removed.
This is one that you changed.
That's one that I would change. It doesn't need a vote to remove it. It doesn't need anything. My personal best practices opinion is if a councilman wants something as a regular agenda item, he simply asks for it and it's on the regular agenda, period.
How do you grapple with the fact that the council has no input whatsoever on what gets into consent agenda in the first place?
I don't have any comment on that because what I'm saying is you can remove it if you don't like it.
Would we be better off not to have any consent items whatsoever?
Absolutely not, because once again, we're having this problem that if we're moving on every item, that meeting is going to get long and the public is either not going to want to be at the meeting or otherwise have to leave early and be dissuaded from attending. If it is items of routine in nature, consent agenda is regularly used, and I would say probably sparingly used compared to most bodies, sparingly used in Fremont compared to most bodies that I've either represented and or been before.
So I just want to be clear, even if you strike the last sentence, the essence of this is that the public will no longer be able to take things off the consent agenda unless their council representative does it for them.
That's correct.
Even if they show up at the meeting and ask or want to speak, they can't do it.
That would be correct.
Thank you.
That doesn't prevent them to doing the normal channels that you would do and talk to your council member and say, Brad, I really want this item 5 removed. I think it's a problem and here's why. There's nothing that prevents them from doing that.
Yeah,
Glenn,
so you said you got a lot of experience working with cities.
Mhm.
Is there any city out there that you see resembling us as far as the council having no input whatsoever on what's on the consent and how the orders would go? I mean, from my investigation, it appears that there's some level, this is a city council meeting. There'd be some level of action or interaction with the council to set up that agenda. Have you
So-
seen?
yeah, so I can answer that a little bit. Because a lot of the bodies that I appear before, I don't know say the internal workings of how they've done it. But I can tell you from talking with other city attorneys representing another city, generally speaking, that's left to the administration as to how that is set up. That's why you have those people here, is to take care of those things for you. Certainly a council person can put stuff on the agenda. But we, generally speaking, bodies rely upon their administration to decide what is consent, but yet they still have the opportunity to remove it from the agenda.
Doesn't the city of Omaha have a consent agenda group that?
Specifically, I don't know, but I will tell you that I've gone to city council meetings in Omaha where I'm agenda item 93
Yeah.
and think I'm going to be there for hours, and they pass the first 70 items by consent.
I would
So there's,
just from the experience I've seen so far, I just think that we would have a better agenda if the council was brought in, or, a small group of council members was brought in to help facilitate building this agenda
Mhm.
and allowing there to be some input before it ends up in our hands on Friday afternoon. So
well, and that's, again, that's your call as a city council. I guess from my own personal experience, if I'm sitting on a board, I'm expecting, and I sit on a lot of foundation boards, even as president of those boards, I don't create the agenda. I have the executive director create the agenda. And if I need anything on the agenda after I look at it, I tell them, I say, hey, I need something on the agenda. But I don't think that I've done that once in the many years that I've served as a presiding officer with those type of organizations.
I just think Fremont right now, in the place that it is, I think it would be a good move for our city to move towards that, not permanently, but just, for the next year or so, just to move towards building some solidification between the staff and the council and just building some unity.
Sure.
So,
And certainly you can do that. And the only thing that I'm getting back to is if something on the consent agenda you don't think should be on the consent agenda, what I'm proposing says it immediately gets pulled by you requesting it.
my question too is that last sentence really bothered me when it took the council's ability to take something off and it had to be voted on. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you retracted that.
That should be completely out, period.
Mr.
I just wanted to mention too, one of the very first items that we have on each agenda is the opportunity for the city council to, change the order of the items on the agenda so that it can proceed in a logical way, because what was occurring was I was being lobbied every week by council members. I want my item first. And so right now I put them on the agenda as they're received, because how do I decide? One council member said they want theirs first, another one, and you're not in a meeting to make that decision. It makes it difficult.
Mr. Sullivan, I just want to be respectful. We were supposed to have public comment at 6:30. We
Mhm.
can continue on and I can still have 30 minutes of public comment. We'll just start the council meeting a little later if council's okay with that. Okay,
Next item is section 2107. And again, we're trying to fit into a mold, or let's say different sections that already been made by your code. One of the issues, and actually the Robert's rules issues comes up more in sections a little bit further. There are several things that we've preserved what we did in these rules that are still what I would call Robert's rules. A little bit of the difficulty with Robert's rules is Robert's rules, one, didn't anticipate public comment as part of their meetings. It was more, Robert's Rules started out as a military process to have meetings with several people. Secondly, Robert's Rules, they teach full semesters on Robert's Rules. And there are very intricate rules with respect to Robert's Rules that, just in my humble opinion, I don't think that a council member should have to become so adept at Robert's Rules that they're going to sit there and have to study that more than what they're studying the subject matter of what they're looking at. And so I have adopted quite a bit of Robert's Rules in here, but beyond that, I haven't gone into some of the extreme idiosyncrasies of Robert's Rules. And the other difficulty of Robert's Rules is there's people that sit and debate what Robert's Rules means. So I tried to do, as we went through this, take what I thought was the best part of Robert's Rules that would still be functional within a city council. So we basically just removed Robert's Rules, but you'll see a lot of Robert's Rules as we move forward. I don't think there's anything on 2107 that outside of that I've removed that there's any big issue in 2107. Any questions? or
Councilman
comments?
Yerger?
I do. I guess part of it is just a statement, but I do have a question. Obviously, Robert's Rules is the most common procedural authority in the United States. I assume you would agree with that.
Yes.
And that Robert's Rules is probably the most popular and easiest to locate online questions with regards to parliamentary procedure because it's available online as well.
Yeah.
And if we had a parliamentarian, rather than rely on members of council or the mayor or legal, we would be very proficient at Robert Rules implementation because we would have an expert in the room. We don't do that today, of course, but that's an option. We could do that. So my real question is this: if we don't have Robert's Rules and the city doesn't write a comprehensive 800-page gorilla set of rules like Robert's Rules, and we have 2 or 3 or 5 or however many you've encodified in whatever we would be considering for changes, and we have a procedural matter going on in the room that requires some sort of decision, who will make that decision?
Well, from this aspect, we'll look at the rules of conduct for our meetings. Generally, people will ask for a decision, and then the presiding officer decides whether to follow that advice or decide to move in another direction.
Thank you. That was my I expected the answer that the presiding officer would decide the rules. Thanks.
I think there is an appeal process with that too, isn't there? Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't know that you're going to get a parliamentarian to be in this building to interpret the rules and add that to the cost of a city council. And secondly, the parliamentarian could be wrong as well. So somebody has to be the decision maker at the end of the day. And it would make sense that the presiding officer of the meeting would make that decision. Going on, did anybody have any more on that? I mean, that one's pretty dry. 2108 meeting rules, rules of conduct. And again, some of these aren't huge issues to me. There was some confusion with respect to some items to be reconsidered at a meeting or two that you had. And some of that came up during the, after we'd already moved on to other items. So in a sense, that item was on the floor and it had been closed. So in a sense, I think what we're trying to say here is, if a lot of times we end up getting motions or something made in a double negative, or we're voting, if you're against the ordinance, you have to vote yes, or something like that. And the person voted and said, well, that's not what I meant to vote. And so then they say, I want to make a motion to reconsider at that time. We have not taken the rule that we still have a motion to reconsider from the 3, I believe it's 3 weeks or 3 meetings. 3 meetings. So they could then say, after we moved on, I screwed that up. I want to do a motion to reconsider at the next meeting and get that on the agenda. So that's the only change there. I think that was just a matter of there's some question there and we're trying to make a rule to address it. Any comments or questions on that?
Councilman Yerger.
Well, I think I was a party to the discussion that led perhaps to this change, and I would just point out, obviously, if you eliminate Robert's rules, you eliminate the bone of contention that's here, because Robert's rules not only addresses reconsideration, it also addresses the opportunity to rescind previous action. And the problem that we had that night is that we passed something that needed to be corrected. It was totally an error, got approved anyway. And had we not made the mayor recognize that fact and put it on at the end of the agenda to reconsider, it would have stood in error. And so Robert rules in that position would allow and did allow us to bring that back. And that's what we did. This rule would say, I guess we're limiting to reconsideration, but I assuming that means since we won't have Robert's rules, we couldn't come back and rescind the previous action if we knew it to be an error once voted on.
That's true. And again, I'm not here to debate that. If you want to have it in there, then an item may be reconsidered at the same meeting, even though we've gone on with the agenda, that's fine. I just think we need to either have it one way or the other, as opposed to nothing. So section 9 is the same thing. Section 13, the initial thing that I want to point out is I talked about privileged motions in here. The privileged motion that I would add to this is that adding that someone can make a motion in the middle of debate or on a motion to then make a motion for public comment. So if there's a need to have public comment, or for instance, you're looking at something and there's a person in the audience that can give you direction on it, you could open it up for that person to come up and speak so that you could try to understand what you're dealing with additional matters. So again, going back to the issue of an item that would be on the agenda that you feel that needs public comment, even though we don't have it set for public comment, we would have the privilege of you making that motion. So I would add that. And then 14, again, this is kind of incorporating Robert's rules a little bit. And that is Robert's rules basically has an item that if you don't get a motion in second, you don't have anything to talk about. We kind of do it the opposite. We talk about it, then we do a motion in second, then we say we don't talk about it. So that's kind of stood me on my head a couple of times trying to turn it the opposite way in my head. So it's a simple issue here too. It could be an ordinance you don't even like. You can still, and typically I think anytime something's on the agenda, you want to make a motion to approve, even if you're against it, because then you can debate and say, this is where I'm at and this I'm at, because nobody gets confused on the double negative at that time. The ordinance or the contract or whatever is open for a motion to approve. It's pretty simple. If you don't want it to pass, you vote no. When we do that, when we say a motion to deny the ordinance or otherwise, you're voting a double negative, which is a little bit confusing. Any comments or questions on that? The last one on that page looks like it's been renumbered to 17. That is just a little bit of clarity that comes from the statute. In other words, it has to be 6. No matter how many people are here, you got to have 6 votes of the elected body to suspend the rules, which is similar to when we suspend 3 readings. It has to be 6, no matter how many people you have here. 2112, very little there. I don't think there's anything in here that would prevent any boards or commissions being extended for a year. It would just take a vote to do so. 2201, we've already addressed. Okay. This is actually a bit of a duplication, but
Take a motion to receive. Councilman Sukram,
Motion received.
Councilman Ligban,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
this ordinance you've already have, but I just have it highlighted under a different section and thought it'd be easier to try to separate them that way. One of the things that really struck me as odd when we first started representing the city was that you vote on the first reading and the second reading of the ordinance. And 164042 requires that you read it on 3 separate occasions, but then you vote after that. Otherwise, if you have the right to suspend 3 readings. We do that a lot on, say, a bond issue because we've got timing with interest rates, or there's some exigent circumstance that requires us to vote on the first reading. Or for that matter, if it's such a mundane issue, but it still has to be passed by ordinance, you may suspend. So on the first reading, what I'm proposing is you just simply read the first reading by title only. That puts the ordinance out there, puts it out for the public. And then secondly, the structure that you have now is you have public hearing on the first reading of the ordinance. And I will tell you, a person who has to watch stuff very often for other bodies I represent, I find out about the first reading about 2 or 3 days after the first reading. And so in this city, I would have already missed the public hearing. So first reading, it gets it out there, it gives people an opportunity to think about it. First reading is also typically when we get our agendas out shortly before a meeting, doesn't really give you a lot of time to digest an ordinance if it's of great importance to you. The second meeting, you have a second reading. Again, it would be by title only. There's no vote, but then you would open up the public hearing process and the word would get out, hey, the council's got this crazy ordinance out. We need you to show up. But that really is difficult to do on the first reading. So we move that to the second reading. And then on the third reading, we'd literally make a motion one way or another and vote on the matter and either pass or it not pass on that vote. As far as voting and debating, I would say I know of no other city that debates the reading of the first ordinance, except if they make a motion to try to kill the ordinance right at that time. And that one you'd literally have to make a motion to vote down the ordinance because if you made a motion to approve it, would have had to have 3 readings. I can't avoid that double negative. This to me gives the public a much better opportunity to know something's coming up, give them some time to think about it, prepare what they want to say, and then appear at the second reading. Any questions on that or comments?
Councilman Yerger.
I just want to be clear about the last sentence in number 2 under the second reading. So the public under your proposal is the only one that gets to speak in second reading. There won't be any discussion or debate by council members.
Yeah, and I'm struggling a little bit with that. There obviously will be no vote unless you suspend the rules. Typically, there's going to be discussion between the public when they ask questions and so forth. But generally, I would say there's no discussion that occurs at that point.
I don't understand that part either, because under our rules today, we don't get to interact and answer questions or discuss public comments. We just take them. And then we're the ones that actually have discussion after the fact. And if we can't have discussion on this second reading, whatever they say is just heard by council. We don't have interaction, and you're not proposing that we start having interaction, are you?
No, what I'm saying is, again, first time you review the ordinance, it's just, you read it, it's out there. Second reading, you take public input. Third reading, you guys debate the issue and you pass it or you don't pass it.
Okay, thanks.
Very similar to a contract. You only, unless you, of course, you can always make a motion at the third reading, again, to open, in my opinion, change this a little bit to allow more public comment if further information comes up. You could also make a motion to postpone because you need to do further steps on it. But for the most part, the idea is get in there, have your discussion. You can still put in amendments and everything else that you want to share with them. But the idea is debate the item and make a vote. No different than what we do on a contract, debate the item and either pass the contract or not.
Councilman Ellis.
So as I'm reading this, the council will not get to vote until the third reading. Or
Correct.
debate.
Correct.
I think in the past, we have really helped constituents that are trying to purchase land or whatever, to have that go back and forth between us. Hey, we need to change this, but this is all done on the first reading. Staff says, okay, we'll get those changes made on the second reading. That will never take place now. We won't be able to voice our opinion until the very last meeting. And there will be no back and forth. Hey, we'll change that. We'll do this. We'll do that. So that's a downfall in this instance, where the council in the past has had the ability to work with the constituent that's purchasing land or doing something and trying to figure out how we can make this happen. Let's make changes. But I'm seeing that would not take place now.
The way that it's written now, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah. Now, and you make a good point. I'd have to think through that a little bit. Yep. Anybody else on that?
I have a follow-up.
Oh, yep.
Kind of a follow-up question. Councilman Ellis kind of picked up on one of the questions I wanted to ask, but I just follow up with this. So it's been fairly typical for us to have changes made to whatever might come across our plate on first reading. And when it comes back to second reading, there's been a change. Or that might occur, as he indicated, between second and third reading. So my question to you is, if we haven't had any way to participate in the readings that are being presented in first reading, and then the public gets to see, well, at second reading are different than those that came from first reading that they might be prepared to discuss, does that start the clock all over again and you go back to first reading because it's been amended after read?
No, so I think what I would do in that instance, if there's certain changes that somebody would like to make or propose, that they would get those proposed changes so that it could be included in the packet. It would still be included in the packet, but you would just have the reading of the title to it on the first and second reading.
But there really would be no way for the public to know that something in the second reading has changed language without doing their own comparison of first to second reading. It's just going to be in the
Well,
material.
no,
presented.
because you would have a first, you would have the reading as the ordinance as presented. The ordinance would always be as presented. Then if there's Mr. Yerger's proposed changes would be right behind it and be like in a red line
For second reading.
for second reading. If you get them in time, yes. Yes. I mean, anybody can propose any changes that they want and that can be put into the packet. I mean, in today's age, what's nice about it, nobody has to drive down to city council anymore and go pick up and sit in a room or read all the packet. They can pop up on their screen and read it. So. 2308, I don't know that I have any comments on that unless anybody else has comments or questions. I think that one was.
Councilman Yerger.
I'd like to make a comment on subparagraph D. Does that still stand in your recommendation?
Yes, it does.
Okay. As legal counsel for private parties or other businesses, et cetera, would you give advice and counsel to them that they should sign something, approve something that will be changed later by anybody after they have rendered their signature to a particular document?
For most of my clients, yes, I would do that.
You
for them.
would say, so if I agreed to buy a
No, what I'm saying is if my guy did signed a contract or something, because at the end of the day, your ordinance is going to be published, okay? If I've got a contract that somebody signed and it says OT instead of TO, I don't see any reason why that can't be changed because it's a non-substantive issue. It's clearly a typo.
I understand typos.
Yeah.
I'm looking for something that might be of more substantive nature, but might still be characterized as, and what is the definition of non-substantive? Is it just typographical and grammatical? That's it? Or are there other things which we have pulled out of ordinances and resolutions in the past that are incorrect? And if we don't make amendments at the meeting, they are not codified and recorded in the minutes, and therefore the standing resolution or ordinance as passed would have error. Are you indicating that?
What I'm indicating to you is non-substantive or typographical grammatical revisions can be changed by them. If you don't trust those people to do that, then that's a decision that you as the council can decide to do.
Thank you.
And at the end of the day, that means that ordinance is probably going to have to come back and get corrected. Any others on that? Okay, section 2502, hired officials. The only change that we have here is an odd provision that, from what I understand at one point, was inserted in there. And I really think, and particularly Molly, who is handling personnel issues, believes that this provision should be removed. I know of no other city council that does that, except to the extent that the statutes require it, and the statutes require it for let's see, city administrator, city engineer, city clerk, and city attorney. And it's just a bit of an odd deal. And quite honestly, the biggest reason that we don't like it is because it's a procedural step that isn't required. And if we get sued later, exhibit 1 is going to be the recording and video of that meeting and things that were said at that meeting. So I think it creates a high liability issue for the city by putting that provision in. Any comments or questions on that one? I believe that's it. I think there were a couple other sections that were included in your packet, but the agenda just referred to section 2. So I'm not really going to proceed on that just based on how the agenda was titled. And then I guess I just ask for any other general comments that you might have on this. And from that standpoint, if you want to email me or call me to discuss any of these issues, that's fine. I have no timeline. And again, these are asking somebody who walked down and went 2 blocks to the north and then went a block west to go 2 blocks to the south and turn east. So, and if you've been doing that for a long time, again, I think inertia in our behaviors is difficult to change. But my goal, and the goal that I heard a lot of people coming when elections were going on, in obviously my ear's not as close to the ground in Fremont as the rest of you, but the length of the meetings was a huge issue for a lot of people. And so I'm trying to create a more efficient meeting while still trying to preserve to the extent possible people's ability to participate and actually increase participation by decreasing the amount of time that it takes to hold a meeting.
Take some brief comments as we're already behind here, Councilman Yerger.
I appreciate the fact that we got an opportunity to have interactive questioning tonight, which is atypical for the way we conduct our meetings anymore. So I appreciate that. I would entertain and offer, because I had several constituents contact me that came to this meeting, I believe, with the expectation that they would be allowed to speak on this matter as well. And I don't know if you had plans to do that. If you do, great. If you don't, I'd like to ask the council to consider that and make a motion to do so, so that the people that are here for this purpose be able to speak tonight.
Well, and if I may comment on that a minute, that has been the typical process in which you have done that. So I don't even know that you need a comment. I think the mayor can just open it up for public comment.
Yeah. I'll open it up. No, we have a big crowd tonight. So yes, if you're wanting to comment on this, please do so. We'll have up to 3 minutes. So this will be your opportunity if you wish to comment. Please state your name and address.
Jim Jackshaw, 1731 North C. 2-107 Robert's Rules. I'll repeat, Jim Jackshaw, 1731 North C. In regards to 2-107 Robert's Rules of Order. And I'll be quick. I would go on record as being opposed to eliminating Robert's Rules of Order. The problem I see with this is I get the impression you want to eliminate Robert's Rules of Order. If you run into a point of contention with any issue, big or small, and you delegate procedure to one individual, I think it would be a disservice to the public to not have the entire council rule on procedure. We can't project into the future what that would be like unless somebody's got an example. But to delegate authority to one individual to allow the direction on an agenda item would be a disservice to the public. So I'll leave with 2 questions. And I hope I made myself clear there. When was Robert's Rules of Order? When did that come into existence? Period. And somebody could probably research that on their smartphone real fast. And the other is, when did Robert's Rules of Order come into existence to be used in the city of Fremont? So, and I would ask you to check that out. And rather than eliminate Robert's Rules of Order so quickly, I think it should be discussed more fully. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Excuse me. Okay. Brenda Ray, I live at 1445 North Irving in Fremont. I just have a simple question regarding something to be pulled from the consent agenda. I understand representative government, that we should each contact our representative, okay? We all know between phone tag and all the stuff with emails, how is the public going to know for sure that their representative got the request and will request it be pulled? I know it would be a courtesy, but a little bit of a rule there for the councilman to let the public person that requested it, let them know that they will do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Von Buren, 2046 East 30th. Just a thought for you. I think it's obvious what's driving the meeting. And of course, that's length of meetings, and the statement has been made that meetings need to be efficient. And I certainly agree with that. So I like the intent. I like the direction this is going. Just like to share an experience. If you look at what's going on over the last 10 years, though, our meetings have become progressively longer. Our answer every time has been to restrict the public, to increasingly shorter testimony times and to restrict you as councilmen, council persons. We're the people who pay the bill. You're the people who represent the people paying the bill. And yet we're the only ones limited. And I think we need to take one step back. What I'd like to suggest, I'm on the State Education Commission. How long would it take to approve a $46 million project in this body? You could do it in about 30 minutes. We have a coordinating commission that is responsible for Mabel Lee Hall. You might remember it from UNL. 100 and some thousand foot facility be torn down, replaced with 118,000 facility at a cost of $46 million. The key of this whole thing is the commission staff, which is the equivalent of our staff here, entirely capable, had a preset assigned set of questions to answer. Cost, why is it necessary? Could we do something else? You know, just the basic stuff that you would think would be asked about it. Once that happened, it goes to a set of 3 or 4 of the 11 commissioners who are on a building and finance committee, and they beat it up and they ask further questions. They've already got the basics. The other questions are answered. By the time that it gets to a group of 11 commissioners that are scattered across the state that really can have no contact with each other, the questions are basically identified. They get the proceedings about 10 days in advance. They can go through, look at the questions, they can call the staff, they can get those things advanced. I mean, literally, we passed a $46 million plan in less than 30 minutes. In less than 4 hours, we got through that. We got through 15 other agenda items, and we got through almost 20 educational program approvals because we used subcommittees and we did a better job of trying to utilize our staff. My point is, all through this, we're talking about efficient ways to streamline the meetings. Most of this is streamlining discussion, limiting, if you will, but nowhere in here has anyone talked about best practices for conducting meetings. There are best practices for conducting meetings. So before you look at best practices that potentially limit the public, I'd suggest that you take an internal look and say, how are we constructing our meetings right now? Could we be more efficient? And I submit they're out there. You certainly can, and be glad to give you any of the models we've used. Thank you.
Linda Von Baron, 2046 East 30th Street, Fremont. I want to begin by thanking the council for your help with the drainage problem we have had in Central Park and surrounding neighborhoods. We very much appreciate your understanding and the support you have given us so far. But as important as public safety is, there is another issue that is even more important: the right to speak and be heard. Every Fremont resident should be concerned, actually a little alarmed, over the changes the administration is asking you to make. From the public's view, this looks and sounds like the next step in deciding what we can see or not see, what we can say or not say. You already limit the time we can speak. You already limit the number of times we can speak. The city has even limited the time you can speak as councilman. Where is the transparency in all of this? Instead of being more transparent, these changes are one more step to shut out the public. We understand that these are not your changes as a council, but they will shut down full disclosure on what the council is deciding. Your rules already limit what we and you as council persons can say. To continue to muzzle us while the staff and administrators speak freely, interrupting as often as they please, is a double standard that undercuts everything you intended to be. The state auditor's report just released makes it apparent we already have a serious problem. Please stop the city from making it even worse. We are asking you to protect our right to know. Thank you.
Irene Alexander, 1767 Victoria Lane. I just wanted to say that the mayor and the council have been listening to concerns from the citizens, and you have taken some actions to address those concerns. Thank you for hearing us, and thank you for serving your community. I know that you can never make everyone totally happy. There have to be balances between the needs and wants of development and citizens. I'm quite sure that business and developers have your ear frequently outside council meetings. So please continue to allow citizens their right to their current options in this forum. In government by the people and for the people, one or two should not control the narrative. Thank you.
Jerry Delaney, 2940 Laverna Street. I just have a couple of comments. First, Robert's Rules of Order is a very long-standing and widely accepted standard for how meetings should run. I'm not questioning the intelligence of anybody in here, but I personally guarantee you, I'm not as smart as the people that put this together so many years ago. I think it's a proven standard, and I think it'd be a mistake to step away from it. I agree with the statement that was made earlier that our form of government is not a democracy, as it's often called. It is a republic. We elect officials to make decisions for us. And I agree. Obviously, if everybody was allowed to come and vote on every issue at every meeting, they wouldn't just last hours, they would last days and weeks. So the format of a republic is good, but that doesn't mean it takes away the right for citizens to talk and voice their opinion, not just to their specific elected officials, but to all of you. And you've shown that at recent meetings that it does work when people have gotten up and spoken on issues, and the council as a whole, or at least as a majority, has during those discussions had some change in opinion and moved in a different direction that they might not have if that discussion had not been allowed. So, and my last thing I want to comment on some of these changes you're looking at, if there's no vote or public hearing at all of the readings, there's going to be very limited opportunity to adjust or fine tune any of the issues that you're discussing. I know it was said, all right, we'll do a first reading. There won't be any discussion by council or public. There won't be a vote. It'll just move on to second reading. But if council wants to attach a few things to that second reading, they can, and then they'll be gone through and so forth. Okay, yeah, that would save some time. Well, let's flip it another way. Currently, we have discussion amongst council and amongst the public on every reading. And I've been at meetings where in some cases on the first reading of an issue, or maybe the second reading of an issue, because of discussion that went on, it was decided that the issue should be dropped completely and never go on to a further reading. In that case, the public comment time saved a lot of wasted time at future meetings. So that decision can work either way. It can save you time in some instances, but it can cost you time in other instances. So I don't think that's a good issue. I understand length of the meetings is an issue, but I think we're already limiting discussion. We don't allow filibusters here like the state Senate does. I can't, or you can't stand up and talk endlessly. We're both limited on our time already. I think that's probably a big enough step. I don't think it would be proper to take away discussion completely. I think that'd just be wrong. And as Linda said, it would be completely non-transparent. Thank you.
Lori Adams, 2824 Laverna. I am not a public speaker. I've never attended a city council meeting in my life, and honestly have not had any interest in local politics until now. Sure, I did my civic duty in voting in the elections each year, but I trusted in the process that those elected politicians would be committed to serving the people who elected them. However, I have deep concerns about what is being proposed here tonight. Over recent months, censorship has become rampant in this country, and to the point that I fear we no longer have free speech in America anymore. A couple of years ago, who would have thought that you could be put in Facebook jail simply for telling the truth? If your opinion does not fit the narrative or an agenda then you are banned from social media networks. In other words, your voice or opinions don't matter. That concerns me immensely. And now to think that we could be muzzled or silenced here in my little old town of Fremont, it scares me. I would like to think that when each one of you ran for office, that your top priority was to serve your people, we the people. And I pray that it is still your top priority. But how can you properly do that if you don't want to hear the voices or concerns of your people? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I beg of you, please do not give up on serving your people. I beg of you to please not silence your people. And I beg you to please let your people be heard. Thanks for listening.
Steve Ray, 1445 North Irving Street, Fremont. Well, section 2302 about the ordinances and 3 readings, several times they've had to be changed. I mean, they don't seem to always get everything together right away. And I want to know what's going to happen if you have the first reading, you just read it. Yeah, public can come for second reading, but are you going to be able to have a 3/4 vote, suspend the rules and go right into second reading at that meeting? And then people aren't going to be ready to even give a comment. And maybe they thought, well, we had 3 readings, we'll come to the second one, but you're going to bypass them right away if you're going to do that. Robert's Rules of Order, yes, it's cumbersome, but there's a lot of things in there that you need to run a meeting. I want to know who's going to make the rules for this to be its general guidelines, and a lot of times of how to run a meeting. Who's going to make those rules up? That's how you're going to run your meetings now. If you don't follow those a lot, is the mayor going to make the rules himself altogether? Is the council all going to come together to make the rules? I doubt if you can all get together and agree to that. I mean, I just don't know what you're going to use and how you're going to put that together. And the other thing is about limiting speech in 2108. I don't think it's not a new amendment, but when you limited the council members to only 5 minutes to speak, and I've been to a lot of council meetings and I watched the clock, their time starts when they start speaking. It continues to run. If they ask a staff member for an answer, it continues to run on their 5 minutes. And I think when they're done asking their question, if they ask Mr. Newton a question and he's answering, his answer's on his time and the council member's time restarts when he starts speaking again. You shouldn't be holding his 5 minutes and getting an answer because it might take him 2 or 3 minutes to give him the answer. Well, he's already lost most of his time. So I don't think it's right. And if you're going to consider all these amendments, I'd hope that you would consider them separately, section by section, and not just take them vote across the whole board, because I think they need to be separated and talked about individually and voted individually on each section of this instead of just all of them at once.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D as in Dog Street here in Fremont. Mr. Sullivan had made a comment about employees somewhat protected in order to come to the council to appeal. Some of you that are seated here today as council recall when we put this into motion. This is during the time frame when the controversial position of one person in charge of both city side and utility was put into motion. This was more of a protectionary measure for these employees so that a person who perhaps tried to do things a specific way that council requested, perhaps had dissent from city administrator, that they would be somewhat protected and could come to the council should their job be at risk. And that was the whole basis of adding some of these to that. And hopefully you retain that, because one person in charge of both sides could have a lot of power. and you need to retain the authority that you have over that position, in my opinion. On something else that was touched upon is about the debate on the 3rd. It is correct, as far as Robert's rules, to open up and have a discussion after a motion is made, or excuse me, after a first reading. But if you don't allow that public discussion to go on at that second and actually onto the 3rd, where do you have that interaction? We don't all have representatives, 2 representatives that will fully access us and reply to us and have that conversation. We all don't have that agenda downloaded, and oftentimes it's revised by the time Friday late hits, having experienced that myself. So where's that public interaction? I get it. It's going to be putting training wheels back on to have a first read and absolutely no discussion, but you won't have anything pass on the 3 reading rule then, because no discussion will be held. Look at the salary ordinances you're asked to consider. And then I do have a question for Mr. Sullivan that I know that he can't respond to because of discussion. But according to 16404, what can be voted on by the vote of the mayor is ordinances and resolutions or orders or appropriation or payment of money. So that's specific with monetary. And then again, contractual or for work order. I'm not aware of anything else that's a freelance vote. And I could be wrong, but reading through the state statutes 1604, 16503, it appears to be the such. I'm not opposed to going to my council representative, whether it's, I'm 2nd Ward, Dev Sukram and Mr. Ellis, and I'm hopeful that at least one will reply. I am aware and have been contacted by people from Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, and Ward 4 who have complained that their councilmen have not replied when they've called them and or emailed them. That is a problem. So where does the consent agenda come into play?
Steve Haysbrook, 925 East 5th Street. I've made some changes thanks to the presentation to my comments, so bear with me while I look at my notes here. But we have, my wife and I have specific comments on some of the proposed changes. Section 2103, open public comments. We would remind the mayor, the administration, current legal counsel of Nebraska Statute 84-1412, quote, subject to the Open Meetings Act, the public has the right to attend and the right to speak at at meetings of public bodies and all or any part of a meeting of a public body, end of quote. Seems to me these new changes are in conflict with that. You have already limited council debate. Now you want to eliminate opportunities for public comment? I struggle with that. My wife and I both struggle with that. I quote Mr. Sullivan from a recent Fremont Tribune article, quote, the purpose of the proposed changes is to create a more efficient professional council setting, end of quote. So my citizen comments make your meeting inefficient and unprofessional, so just get rid of them? That's just insulting to me. That's just wrong. It appears to me these changes have little respect for public comment or public debate, and that's just wrong. Section 2106 seems to me that another attempt to restrict debate and public input. As a citizen, I could no longer request removal. I have no problem working through our city representatives in our ward. They are both very excellent, and I have no problem with that. But I don't know that that's the case citywide, and that's a problem. Section 2-108 meetings. So once something is passed in a meeting, you can't go back? What if new information surfaces? Another limitation, it seems to me. Errors could stand. I struggle with that. I do like the part and the piece about eliminating double negatives. As I've sat here and listened and watched or on Zoom, sometimes it is a little confusing to say, okay, do I want my representatives to vote no or yes the way it stands? And so eliminating the double negatives would be great. Section 2-112, board and commissions. If your continued goal is to limit the length of formal council meetings, have study sessions like Mr. Ellis has recommended for years. Hammer out the details there. Bring in experts, learn things, challenge things, brainstorm, allow public participation and comment. Have a council member lead these and report back in the official council session. Section 2-302, ordinance reading.
I'll have to ask you to wrap it up. Sorry.
I knew that was coming. This limits council and public debate. This disconnects public comment and our council debate by at least 2 weeks. These must be kept together. Who's going to remember my comments from 2 weeks ago when the only council debate is on the third reading? What a disconnect between public comment and our representatives' comment. Public must be allowed to comment, ask questions, bring data and facts to the debate online and in real time, and not filtered through someone else 2 weeks later, and then expect my representative to present what they want to present and what I need presented and what the public needs presented in 3 minutes. That's impossible. That's extremely impossible. So I have more, but we'll leave that for another meeting, I guess.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank everyone for coming. Thought the goal tonight was to go over meetings and discuss things. And I think, we've done that within council, within staff, within the public. And, this was just discussion tonight. No action is being taken. So we all appreciate all the comments that were said tonight. And I think it gave everyone valuable input on our meetings.
Mayor,
Yes.
may I just conclude with a few comments?
Sure.
First of all, a couple of things I wanted to point out. There was a comment made that the administration is asking you to do this. If the administration means me, that's fine. But the administration as a whole, no. This is observations that I made over the 2+ years that we've been here, and my observations that I made in 27 years of practice before the public. So from that standpoint, I'll stand on it as my comments, except for some corrections that I needed to make in here. I could easily sit here and I could ask my attorneys in my office, easily sit here and try to find a way to ride the middle of the road and appease all 8 of you. That would be the easy way out. That's not my responsibility as your attorney. My job as your attorney is to zealously represent you and give you my opinions, and then you can discern what you want to do with them from there. With respect to 84-14-12, that was mentioned with the public's right to speak at meetings. We can't cherry pick parts of a public meetings law or any law for that matter. It says that you do have the right to attend and the right to speak at meetings in public bodies. It also says that, let's find it here. A body may not be required to allow citizens to speak at each meeting, but it may not forbid public participation at all meetings. Those 2 paragraphs have to be read together when looking at that. And again, it's not a violation for us to make reasonable rules and regulations. To say that doing this is an insult, again, what I have proposed is something that I've proposed as a whole. The proposal has not been specifically, let's just limit public comment. I find that offensive that the comment was even made. My goal was to find you a way for you guys to shorten your meetings. Shortening your meetings means giving up things that you do. If you don't want to do that, you can take this piece of paper and recycle it. I'm just trying to do what I think is in the best interest to make this a more efficient body.
I have a comment, Mayor.
Take just, if there's any final comments, we're already running pretty behind here, so.
I have one.
Councilman Yerger.
Yes, I just, and thank you for clarifying, but it was a question that wasn't asked by the participants out here. I received several constituent requests. I think you've told me tonight what I need to hear, but I just want to be clear. So these changes that are being proposed tonight were self-initiated by the legal department. No one at City Hall asked you to do this.
100% correct.
Okay. And no one at City Hall collaborated with you on the language contained in any of these recommendations.
That's inaccurate.
That's inaccurate.
That's inaccurate.
Who collaborated with you then with regards to the language in these proposals?
We drafted that language and then we had a meeting, Zoom meeting with the mayor and the city administrator and took in some of their comments. Most of which wasn't substantive that I recall.
Okay. Thank you. They asked for that clarity and I said I would ask for it if public didn't already raise it. So thank you.
Very good. Any final comments, council? All right, very good. Take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Gibson,
Can I make that motion?
Councilman Legman,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor, to adjourn.
Special city council meeting is adjourned. We now have open public comment. It will be now 30 minutes from 7:29 to 8 o'clock. Anybody that wishes to speak on any item that's not on the agenda can do so at this point. Oh, yes. Yep. There's also comment cards available in the back.
Comment on the nursing home deal.
We'll get to that. Yep. Yep.
I will wait.
Yeah, we need the signature. It's right there next to the comment.
Good evening. I'm Susan Jacobus, 1805 D Street, North D Street here in Fremont. I had a few comments to make. I'll try to keep brief, which I'm not known for. First is I haven't seen any reports from our animal control, neither DCHS, who had been our past, nor the interim for animal control now through Forever Homes. There's no report in your packet, and typically there should have been. Another is I don't see a request for proposal for the flood study, which you as a council requested. in regards to antiquated and perhaps not up to date flooding information on the tech park area in the north area. And I thought you wanted more of a macro study, but I have not seen any request for that proposal on your agenda, and I wondered why. Also, I don't see anything on there or anything requested in answer or response to the auditor's report on the public accounts. That is public record on the state website, and it addresses the payment without the full knowledge of the city council in times past upon the forced resignation of employees of the city. And lastly, I'll try to be very brief. There's been a lot of things that have happened that have been somewhat questionable, and a lot of things that have occurred prior to some of the present council being on. Some of you have been on here 6 years, some of you 2 years, and some of you just newly appointed. In 2012, Mr. Newton was asked to leave the Alaska GVEA. And there were some questionable activities. He went from a $455,000 a year position, more or less, and under the guise of returning to the lower 48. In 2015, he was hired as general manager of the utilities. 2016, there's a picture of Ron Vlach talking with Mr. Newton outside on the sidewalk while he was petitioning with a sandwich board to have the termination of not only City Administrator Shakowski, but also the Planning Director, Troy Anderson, at the time. And then we had Project Rawhide pop up and the closed door sessions with Costco about the Project Rawhide. And underneath his tutelage, Brian Newton also orchestrated the removal somewhat or resignation payoff of $250,000 for Dale Shakowski. Unable to be reached for comment due to a possible non-disclosure, I assume. Brian Newton became the interim city administrator and got an immediate $20,000 a year hike under the guise of saving money. He is now paid one of the highest paid administrators in the state of Nebraska, and we have started to muddy the waters. Utility is to be separate financially and positionally by state statute. So those waters are starting to get a little muddied. Where does that payoff for the employee side of the city come from out of the city? There's no separation. Upon being appointed full-time city administrator, he also got another 45. Then the Baird home was released. This all occurred in 2016 and 2017. And then Paul Payne was asked to leave. He was not in full agreement with Mr. Newton underneath the formation of one position that supposedly was going to save money and now has cost, because you have a part-time city administrator and you have a part-time utility manager. And you still have an assistant manager for the utilities, and you have a policeman who straddles the fence and is the assistant city administrator for the police over them, and then answers to the chief of police, which makes it kind of an interesting and unique working environment. Troy Anderson quit as director of planning in Fremont in December of 2018. Scott Getchman, former mayor, was fined for state ethics violations in 2018. We actually had a woman in her 70s arrested for a violation of going over the time limit. That was an interesting evening. We didn't just have a chief of police kindly escort. We had the assistant city administrator with a gun on assist her out by holding onto her arm and making sure she made it out the door. Ryan Newton then suggested that the city pay the Morningside portion of Giffords Road. And he also has orchestrated the rebate of $12,000 plus an acre on your tech park without the permission or the vetting of it by your Citizen Action Review Committee, which is part of LB 840, and that's by state statute. That is a rebate of monies. That grant was intended for the LB 840 funding, and it paid for infrastructure. So that's going to come out of that restricted fund use because we have no uncommitted funds left in LB 840. There has been a lawsuit for harassment, retaliation, and discrimination against Newton, Shane, and, Mr. Weimer and Mr. Getchman. Some of it has been dismissed, but it is still ongoing. Where's the status of that? The public has not been told the status, but unfortunately, some of us, myself included, receive a report that miraculously appeared off a copier in City Hall, according to the report we all received. And then you limited the debate and the time. So thank you.
Christine Greenfield, 1256 North Clarkson Street. Good evening, Mayor and Council. A recent article has been shared from a citizen of Fairbanks, Alaska. While I won't read that letter from a concerned citizen word for word, I would like to share with you some of her concerns. She states, I hope to help you understand the real harm I have experienced as a result of the state's apparent inability to stand up to corporate business and protecting public health, as I have had a few members die as a direct result from the round-the-clock exposure to coal-fired power plant emissions as it relates to the hauling of coal combustion waste, also known as coal ash. In May of 2012, when Golden Valley Electric Association organized a rally against the Northern Alaska Environmental Center over the Healy Clean Coal Project, I asked Mr. Brian Newton, CEO of Golden Valley Electric Association, about the property onto which coal combustion waste was being stacked. The owner of the property was listed as Newton Ventures LLC. According to the state of Alaska DNR records, Mr. Newton claimed that he would have nothing ever to do with coal ash and that he had no connection with the property by name whatsoever. After I communicated this to a current Golden Valley board member, Mr. Newton was relieved of his work and Newton Ventures LLC dissolved due to a conflict of interest. Catering to and lining the pockets of the corporate giants is having a real effect on human health. Stop letting the big dogs run over the citizens, stop protecting corporate interests, and start protecting the consumers. Should Newton be calling the shots on the air we breathe and the water we drink? With the current state of affairs, I feel it is not only a clean air, clean water thing, but a human rights issue. Stop, listen, and follow your mandate, protecting the consumer interests versus promoting economic development. The people that need you to listen are those of us who are struggling to pay our heating and electric bills. I hope that you will pay attention to what I and so many others have to say. We need to have agencies working on the behalf of citizens and public, not on behalf of corporate interests. Makes me really wonder. So who steps up to help when these guys don't play fair? Thank you.
Just a reminder, the time is now 7:40. We are in open public comment till 8 o'clock. Gives members of the public opportunity to speak on any item. It's not on the agenda for up to 5 minutes. Also on Zoom.
Mayor, I don't think there's anything that would prevent you from closing this part of the meeting if no one else is going to speak.
I'll give one final opportunity for anyone that wants to speak before I close public comment. Oh. Yeah, there's a Zoom.
Yes, it's Gloria Yerger at 2318 East Fifth Street. I've just been notified that a person has been blocked and they will not let her in. Could you please check on that? Because she has something prepared. And while I'm here, I want to mention that we had visitors at my home in the last
Go ahead.
It is that,
Ms. Yerger, can you go ahead and
Yes.
just start over? We kind of lost you there.
okay, did you get the part about somebody's blocked and trying to get in?
Yes, we'll look into that.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, we had visitors at my home coming because they thought the city council was responsible. Vern Gibson had told them that the city council was involved or something like that, and that John C. Fremont Days will not allow 501c3 people. Now, they said if they will not allow the veterans to have anything in the park, they are not going to do the flag, put the flags out. They are not going to be in the parade if they aren't considered valuable enough to have a spot in John C. Fremont Days. And neither are they allowing churches. I just put that out there so that you'll be aware of it, because some people are really upset about it. That's all I have, but my main thing was that somebody's trying to get in and they're blocked. Brad, maybe you can help with that. I didn't want to say any more.
May I comment, Mr. Mayor?
We can't, yeah. We don't make, yeah, no, there's no comments to the, in public comment, just listening. Councilman Yerger.
I just would like to ask, I guess, on behalf of whoever might be being blocked or can't get into the meeting, does the city have a list of people that they do not allow into the city Zoom calls? And if so, what are those individuals? And if not, what protocol can someone have if they can't get in on Zoom, if they've repeatedly tried and everyone else seems to have no problem? I'm curious as to what we do with people that actively want to participate in Zoom and can't be recognized.
Everyone has an opportunity to participate. No one is blocked. Anybody can come on Zoom. It's open to anybody.
Structures are on the first page. And if they can always come into city council too, in this room.
Thank you. There's a Galaxy S9. Please state your name and address, please.
At 1825 North Keene. My question is, if somebody on Zoom is blocked, is there somebody that can walk around behind your council member and your administrator to see who has her blocked? Because I know who is blocked and they're trying to prevent her from talking. I do not like the way the city council is run tonight. Mr. Newton and our attorneys are not representing the citizens. You will not, and I wish you would not, try to silence us. We have a voice. We know how to use it. And you're not going to be running this city. We vote, we pay taxes, and Mr. Joey, we put a lot of faith in you. I hope you don't let us down. Please look at the context of your member sitting right there. Unblock her and let her talk. Thank you.
I'm just going to keep this open for the full comment period. The Galaxy S9 on Zoom.
That I just got a text that she is still blocked.
Ma'am, we only one comment per public comment, please.
Okay, Joey.
Hey, Joey, can we ask our administrator if, because you can have the ability to block or unblock a user. Can we ask our administrator, is that happening? You can't? Okay. Yeah, she's using a PC, and so there can be blocking via the firewall, or there can be blocking via Zoom. See what?
Tyler, do you have the 800 number? Okay, there's also a phone number. Is it this, Tyler, right here? Any one of those? Okay. 1-669-900-9128. 1-669-900-9128. I don't know.
Yes, yes, yes.
Please sign in. Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. No, you're fine. You're fine.
But it's not.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yep. Mhm.
Hi, Robin White, 3201 North Yeager Road. I just have a couple of questions. So people have asked me to speak on their behalf. Why do we continuously allow council members to disrespect other council members? Why do we allow the city administrator to speak freely and control meetings and use cell phone during meetings, as well as other council members? Thank you kindly.
I guess it would show up. It would show up and just not be video. Should, yeah.
Well, it's on all the instructions.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Want to take a break? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just those two.
The time is now 8 o'clock. We'll close public comment. We'll take a 10-minute recess before we start the regular council meeting.
Yeah. Somebody needs to get up there.
Yeah, I'll actually explain to Judy, because they were gone. And then I didn't want I have one more line on my face. I went over there the other day. And she was on the phone, so I didn't bother. So I thought I could get her. So I got four lines. Yeah, yeah. Well, we played Monday night, actually. And we played cleanup on Monday night. And then, we make excuses.
I'll look into that. All right, if council wants to go ahead and take their seats, please. Okay, before we begin the regular city council meeting, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Time is now 8:10. We will call the regular city council meeting to order. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. 7 council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now get into mayor's comments. Proud tonight to be announcing 6 service awards for May. And I know we have a few here in attendance. I'll go ahead and read these off. Gary Ogden, 30 years of service. Gary was hired in 1991 as a fuel handler at the power plant. In 1999, he was promoted to fuel handling supervisor. Then in 2019, he was promoted to the power plant maintenance supervisor position. 30 years of service for Gary Ogden. Is Gary here? Okay, all right. Josh Knudsen, 10 years of service. Josh was hired in 2011 as a power plant operator 1. In 2015, he was promoted to power plant operator 2. So congratulations to Josh. Glenn Kalashek, 45 years of service. Glenn was hired in 1976 as a utility worker 3, promoted to a steam plant auxiliary operator in 1977. Promoted to a steam plant operator 1 in 1981. He was reclassified as a power plant operator 1 in 1990. Promoted to a power plant operator 2 in 1991, and then promoted to power plant operator 3 in 1996. He then was promoted to power plant shift supervisor in 2003. Amazing, 45 years of service. Glenn, are you here to be recognized? Come on up, Glenn. Also, Brett Wilbur, 40 years of service. Brett was hired in 1981 as a plant electrician 1. He was promoted to electrician 2 in 1990. Brett, are you here to be recognized for 40 years of service with the city of Fremont? Don Clary, 15 years of service. Don was hired in 2006 as a part-time office associate for the power plant. In 2011, Don was promoted to a senior office associate. In 2012, she was then promoted to a power plant statistical technician 1. I don't think Don is here, but congratulations to Don on 15 years of service. And finally, Alan Atkinson, 30 years of service. Alan was hired as a firefighter EMT in 1991. In 1994, he became a firefighter EMT intermediate. In 2013, he became a certified rescue technician 2. Alan Atkinson, 30 years of service, coming up and be recognized. That was a lot of years of service. Congratulations to all city employees on being recognized tonight. The other thing I would like to mention as part of my comments is just a congratulations to the Fremont track and field teams. The girls won the state championship and the boys finished runner-up. Again, congratulations to both of them and all spring athletes for their success. They've represented Fremont to the highest standards. So congratulations to them. So that would conclude my comments. Moving on would be item 1, motion to adopt current agenda for the May 25th, 2021 regular meeting. Is there any changes to the agenda from staff, public, the council in regards to the agenda? Councilman Gibson?
I would make that motion.
I will, before we begin, we need to address items 12 through 16. The planning commission needs more information, did not formally approve those yet. So can we make a motion now to continue items 12 through 16?
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Yerger, do you make that motion, Councilman Gibson? Okay. Is there a second? Councilman Yerger?
Well, I really wasn't quite ready for a motion and a second because we really didn't have enough time to suggest whether or not we wanted to move items around. And I guess before we entertain that motion and a second, I'd like for us to make sure we have time to receive anybody's things that they'd like to move. I only rang in because I would like to make a statement, and the fact that you're moving those items kind of resolves part of my dilemma. But I would go for the, state for the record that, we have a council agenda policy. And those items 12, 13, 15, and 16 all had material added to our packet after the Wednesday deadline. That's not allowed by city policy. And we were adhering to that pretty well. We seem to have been remiss in getting things through. Staff's deadline is on Wednesday for everything that's supposed to be in our agenda packet. So I just want to bring that to the attention. And then it's also been brought to our attention that item, I think it's towards the end of the agenda, so I wasn't fully prepared to make this motion, but we were requested to do it. So let me see if I can find it here. It's the agenda item with regards to the appointment of the library director position. And if we could move that up in the agenda earlier, that would be appreciated. I guess it's item 20.
Okay, legal, can we address the motion to continue those items and then address that and then approve the agenda? Okay.
Sorry, but I don't know if you've done actual motions to move things around the agenda to do it, or whether you just do it by consent. But if you do it by motion, I'd do them separately.
Okay. So the motion is, there's been a motion to continue items 12 through 16. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Oh, thank you. Who made the motion?
Yeah, we need to, I made the motion originally.
Okay, is there a second? Councilman Sukram.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Now I would entertain the motion to move item 20 after consent. Councilman Ellis,
I'll make the motion.
Councilman Legman,
Didn't, we already have a, yeah, you're seconding it.
okay.
Thank you.
There's been a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Now I need a motion to approve the current agenda for the May 25th, 2021 regular meeting. Councilman Legman,
I'll make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Now moving on to public hearings. Resolution 2021, item 2, resolution 2021-070 for conditional use permit to convert a former nursing home into multifamily dwellings on property generally located at 2550 North Nye Avenue. At this time, we'll have staff report. Jennifer is on Zoom. Staff report.
Okay, I was waiting to mute. Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is a request to convert an abandoned nursing home into 50 apartments. The property is generally located at 2550 North Nye Street. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the item and voted 9-0 to recommend approval. The property is zoned UR, urban residential. The area to the immediate north is zoned SR, suburban residential, and it's developed with the golf course. The area to the east is also zoned SR and developed with single-family residential. The area to the south and southwest are zoned UR and are developed with multifamily dwellings. And the area to the west is zoned UR and is in agricultural use. It's owned by the cemetery for future expansion. The property had been used, as I mentioned, as a nursing home. It had 94 rooms and a capacity of 143 beds. There are 84 existing parking stalls. The applicant proposes a conversion that will contain 50 units of mixed income senior focused housing with 17 one-bedroom units and 33 two-bedroom units. The proposal includes a community garden, an exercise room, and community space. The northernmost portions of the building that are located in the floodplain will be demolished. In the interest of time, I'll just summarize and state that it is consistent with sections 11504 of the UDC and sections 11317 of the UDC, and staff also recommends approval. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
You cited the city code that you said it was in compliance with, and I don't have all those in front of me, so I'll just ask. I assume that this facility had the requisite buffering for the adjacent residential property zone to the east already as it would have been in an existing facility, so there's no changes necessary. Is that correct?
That's correct. It does have the required buffering. I believe that the residents to the east had asked for some fencing after the Planning Commission meeting. I know they met with the applicant, but I think the applicant could probably better answer that question.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing of resolution 2021-070. Are there any comments from the public?
Steve Ray, 1445 North Irving. I just had a comment. When they were extending Luther Road down there to the Morningside addition, they said that one of the main reasons they wanted to do that was because they only had one way in and out of that area. And there were actually two. And I was over there today where this is at. And it's a real mess when all them people are trying to get out of all those apartments. There is only one street back there and one street out, and you have all those apartments. I just wonder if there's going to be any, I know it's existing already, but I just wonder if there's going to make any accommodations for some other way in and out of there other than that one way. They said it was a fire hazard when they was pushing for Luther Road. Everybody in the city council, oh, they got to have two. We passed that. So I'm wondering why they don't have to have two over there.
Kevin, excuse me, Kevin Prince, 2501 Fairway Drive. This particular property sits smack dab in my backyard. Neighbors and I were at the planning commission meeting. I don't have a lot of disagreement in this property because it's a certain property that I think only going to be used for certain things. My concern is that it does not grow, that they have to build and remodel what is on the existing footprint there, understanding that they're probably going to take some off on the north side. A huge problem with me and my neighbors in my neighborhood is, and we are addressing that, was the planning commission voted 9-0 with the approval to send it on to the city council here with the fact of a 6-foot wooden fence. If you go out and I invite you all to stop out. If you go out and look, our yards are not like the city yards here, flat like this room. My backyard has a tendency to flow. A 6-foot fence in certain parts is going to be too low. I would act, and I know a maximum fence height in Fremont is 8 foot. I would ask because of what this project is, it's not a residential housing behind us. It's housing, I understand, but not residential. I would ask that we have an 8-foot fence put there. The reason being is, and I think some people know, it is a drug infested place. It is a mess. And I'm not blaming the Fremont Police Department because I have called them several times and more neighbors have called them several times. And the problem is, by the time you call them, I know they got other things going. By the time they get there, the culprits are gone. Easter Sunday, sitting there at home, looked out enough to see a blue Ford pickup pull in to, a white pickup pulled into Arbor Manor. And the sign, if you're familiar with that back there, somebody laid a package behind the sign. Was not 5 minutes later, a blue pickup pulled in, picked up the package and got out and left. So you can't tell me there's not problems. About every window in the place is busted. And so as a city, we have got to do something to curb that. I don't know how long it's going to be before this project starts or before it gets completed, but we need security in our neighborhood. We've got people walking between our houses in the middle of the night. It is completely dark back there. I went ahead and put a spotlight on my back of my house just to light up that big grassy area to the south of the building. And so I'm not against the project, but there's concerns, and I want the concerns addressed by the council and by the project managers. And so that's what I have. But you do have folks, I'm telling you, and I don't know what you're going to do, but you have a major drug problem back there. My neighbor has found used syringes thrown in their backyard. And it's completely dark back there. You go around the north side of the building, as if you're familiar with the golf club, it's the number 5 tee off. Everything back there is just tore and it's busted. Something's got to be done to maintain that property. And at
I'll
the
have to
very
ask you to
least,
wrap it up.
yeah. Okay. So that's my thought is security and for my property. Thank you.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. And in response to Mr. Prince's comments, a vacant building will lead to the deterioration of a neighborhood. This is a large vacant building. 140 plus rooms that were taking up space. They're now empty. It's not policed. It's empty. It's on the end of a dead end, basically, and it abuts your neighborhood. Once it's started to fill and the lights come on and there's residents there, I can just appreciate that an income kind place to live for some of our citizens who cannot afford to not live in a mobile home parked in a large vacant lot. And I've spoken to a few of them in regards to this. They're looking forward to this. They're living in a 25 by 10-foot trailer now, a small family, because they can't afford it. 2 workers in a family with a couple little ones, and they cannot afford. They have almost barely above minimum wage job. They're uneducated, but they love their children. They want a better life just like we all do. This will fill that niche. We have nothing else in town that will fill that. This is a perfect use of an empty structure, and exactly what's occurring now will start to cease. You'll see that area policed because you'll see it populated. You'll see lights come on. You'll see people coming and going. It won't be an empty lot where some of the activity has occurred. We see that in different areas of town. Hormel Park is one of them. And the Wildwood Park, whatever the Ridge Park on South Ridge Road has become another. It's difficult to police those areas that are off the beaten path. This will no longer be off the beaten path. It'll be something that hopefully citizens will be able to take advantage of and take some pride in ownership, or at least have an affordable place to live. Because right now, a very small 800 square foot house is renting for over $1,000 a month. And it's 2-bedroom. When you've got 3 children and 2 parents working, it's very difficult to afford that $1,000 a month plus daycare in that interim when one of the parents have to work, much less the leaky windows, the lack of insulation, the high utilities, et cetera, not knowing how to take care of a yard. This promises upkeep. This will be a step up, and it'll fill a niche and it'll fill a void of a building.
Jake Hoppy, 301 South 57th Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I am the sponsor of the project and appreciate Mr. Prince's comments and the opportunity to work with the neighbors. We were able to meet with them at the Planning Commission. Appreciate the comments from Ms. Jacobus as well. We just sort of fell into this property with a thesis around how they're allocating affordable housing credits in the state right now that provides 2 mechanisms to get awards. There's the traditional competitive mechanism, which is what we have applied for. And then there is a non-competitive pathway if you are renovating an existing building that is not residential into a residential building. So it's a very unusual opportunity within the community and within the state in this period to be able to get the resources to redevelop a very challenging building, which I think, the year that we acquired this, I think there were 18 very similar nursing homes that had closed in other communities. We like them because they're often in nice areas of town. They're often, mature trees, generally nice settings, nice residential settings, and would make good conversions if we could get the resources. And it happened to be in this period specifically that we think the resources are available or should be available. We have a similar project going on in West Point. It's a little bit smaller in scale, but we will be breaking ground probably in the August, September timeframe. We are hoping to get these 2 projects on the same timeline. It'd be a bit quick for this one, but we're hoping to get an allocation in June so that we could start this fall and really carry it's the same architect, generally the same plans. We'd probably be using many of the same subcontractors, so leveraging much of the same infrastructure. So mostly I'm here to respond to your questions. We are certainly open to working with the neighbors on, what appropriate buffering needs to look like. I think this is an opportunity for a dialogue with them on what's everyone considers appropriate is probably important. I know that some folks really appreciate their view and maybe wouldn't want it cut off. Some folks want it to shield from the facility. So I think have no problem working out what's best from that standpoint. And anyway, I'll make myself available for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Councilman Sukram?
Yeah. Looking over that property, are you guys going to update all the lighting around there without blinding the neighbors, I should say? But
yeah,
I noticed a lot of this stuff's kind of tore up.
The site, there will be entirely new concrete. The interior, it's basically a full gut with the exception of the brick exterior.
And then the fence that the gentleman was talking about, the 8-foot fence, would that be adequate for you to do?
My only hesitation would be wanting to make sure that's what all of the neighbors are interested in. I think we have had some mixed feedback as to some who enjoy their view unobstructed and maybe some. So I think I would definitely be open to working with the neighbors on what the appropriate screening is. Or putting a screening plan together. That would be my only caveat, but.
Okay. I had a question for staff, but I can wait.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Now, any comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
So I have two, I think. One was what I just heard, and that is that the planning commission apparently approved this 9-0 with a condition regarding the addition of a fence. And if that's accurate, I don't find that in the resolution that we have indicating that they issued their approval with that condition, and we'd need to perhaps add that in recognition of what they've already done, if that's the case. The other thing that I would make an amendment on currently is that the resolution in the opening statement says it's a 50-unit apartment complex. The next and first whereas statement says it's a 216-unit apartment complex. And the final statement says it's a 50-unit apartment complex. I'm assuming we need to amend the whereas statement that says 216 units and change it to 50. I'm asking, I guess, if that's not accurate, staff or the applicant can speak up. Otherwise, I would make an amendment to change the resolution language to reflect 50 units in all paragraphs.
Jennifer Dam, Planning
Councilman
Director. Yeah.
Sukram?
I had a question for staff. Is Jennifer still on?
I'm here.
She is.
Can you hear me?
Jennifer, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Did you guys check with the fire department to see if that was okay for them to come in and out of there?
Yeah, that's okay. There is nowhere to put another entrance or exit from that location. The property to the north is the golf course. The property to the east is developed with single family residence. And the property to the west is the cemetery. The vacant lot is owned by the cemetery. So there is no opportunity for another entrance. It is correct, it is a 50-unit complex, not 216. There was not an amendment by the Planning Commission to add a fence. I think they asked the applicant to talk with the neighbors, but there was not a specific amendment to add a fence. So if that's something that you would like to add, or if you want to amend it in some way to work with the neighbors for a fence plan prior to building permit or something like that, that would certainly be the purview of the council.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I have a motion to amend on the floor with regards to changing the resolution to recognize 50 units in the first whereas statement. And I guess in addition to that, I would add to my amendment at this juncture, based on what staff just said, that it also include working a fence plan with the residential areas. We don't need to specify. I think we'd just say it's a fence plan and that we need to come up with a fence plan as a part of the condition. So my amendment would include both of those items, fix the resolution for 50 units and include a fence plan requirement.
Councilwoman Ganem.
I would second that.
Cast your votes to amend.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Now I need a motion in regards to the amended resolution 2021-070. Councilwoman Ganem,
I would so move.
Councilman Coons. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 3, resolution 2021-077 for a Class C liquor license for the Oasis at FCX LLC, doing business as the Oasis at Fremont Commons, 550 South Johnson Road. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor and council, I received the attached application materials from the State Liquor Control Commission, and reports from the planning department and the police department are attached, and there are no objections from those entities to this application. A notice was published in the paper on the 15th, providing notice of this public hearing. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this item.
Any questions for Tyler? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Are there any comments from the public?
Spencer Lombardo, 9503 South 173rd Ave in Gretna. I'm the applicant, here to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I'm going to move approval of resolution 2021-077.
Councilman Sukram. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Just to clarify, we moved item 20 after consent agenda, correct? Okay. Moving on to consent agenda. All items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda by council, staff, or the public? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Councilman Gibson.
I would make that motion to approve the consent agenda.
Councilman Legman.
And I will second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Well, we will now move on to item 20. Motion to consent to appointment by mayor of the library and the library director of Laura England Biggs. I will go ahead with the report. Laura started working for Key Memorial Library in August 2005 as the assistant director and has served as interim director several times throughout her career. When library director Ann Stevens retired in April of 2010, Laura led the library as interim director through an extended relocation during the last remodel project. In 2012, Laura moved to the Youth Services Library position and has been leading story times programming and outreach from that area for the past 9 years. Laura has again been working as interim director capacity for the last 8 months, leading library staff through the uncertainties of COVID-19 and the expansion project, planning, and fundraising campaigns. She is excited to see the future unfold. Laura completed her master's in library science in December 2006 from the University of Missouri, Columbia, where she now leads the practicum program for the Library and Information Science Department and serves as the part-time academic advisor. She is also the 2021 president of the Nebraska Library Association. Laura is married to Dale Biggs and has 4 cats. So that's important to note. So I am bringing forward Laura England Biggs to the council for appointment as the library director, and would take any questions. Councilwoman Ganem.
No questions, but I certainly want to congratulations and certainly make a motion to consent the appointment by the mayor of librarian.
Are there any comments from the public before I go from there?
How about comments from council?
Seeing no comments from the public, any comments from council, Councilman Yerger?
I just have one question, and I certainly have no opposition to the appointment. I just want to clarify something procedurally. Is the library director considered a department head in the Fremont organizational structure? They're a hired official. My question is, are they considered to be a department head position? They are. So then I have a question for the appointee, because the city, I think it's the handbook, says that department heads shall live within 25 miles of the city limits. And I don't know where you live, but I'm just wondering if residency for this and other appointments is an
We're
issue.
working with Laura on that, so she's aware of it.
She's aware of it. So the answer is you don't live within the 25 miles at this juncture.
Very close. Close enough.
Thank you.
Councilman Legband.
Yeah, I would just like to thank Laura because I've heard nothing but good things from the community and everybody. So I think you're doing a great job and I want to thank you.
There's a motion to approve. Councilman Sukram.
I would second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Congratulations, Laura. All right, now moving on to unfinished business. Item 10, ordinance 5575 to approve an amendment to Blueston Commons Plan Development. This would be for second reading. This time we'll have staff report.
You do the consent agenda? I just wanted to check, did you do the consent agenda?
Yes,
Yes.
Jennifer. You're-
Okay, I'm sorry. This is a request to amend the Bluestem Commons Plan Development. What this particular amendment does is it identifies the construction of 6 detached single-family units and 54, or originally it was 6 detached units and 54 duplex units. This would allow those duplex units to be constructed either as duplex units or as detached single-family units. Additionally, the development has been reduced by 2 lots on Block 5, and Planning Commission recommended approval 9-0. Staff recommends approval as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilman Legband.
If no one else has any comments, I would like to make a motion to approve and hold second reading of ordinance 5575.
Councilman Coons.
And second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
We'll now have second reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit A of ordinance number 5528, specifically portions of the Blue Stem Commons plan development described as lots 1 through 24, block 4, lots 1 through 10, block 5, and lots 1 through 16, block 8, and more generally located west of North Luther Road and 34th Boulevard, Dodge County, Nebraska, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on the second reading.
Thank you. Moving on to item 11
Could I raise a point of information, Mayor?
in regards to,
Just a general point of information. I should have brought this up earlier, and we haven't had any votes outside of unanimous votes along the way. But the folks on Zoom have been calling me, wondering why we don't post the vote results on the wall. And I understand that IT said we don't have technology capable at this juncture. And I'm wondering if, in fact, when we do have votes that are not unanimous, if the clerk could at least read the, if it's 6-2, could you at least identify the 2 nay votes so that the public would know, even though they don't have access to the public visual on Zoom? Seems like that would accommodate them until we get the equipment that we need to fulfill the requirement to post the results.
I'm okay with doing that as long as legal's fine with me doing that.
That's no problem.
Okay.
And commonplace.
moving on, item 11, ordinance 5570 pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Fremont Technology Park to McGinn Holdings LLC pursuant to Nebraska law. This would be for final reading. At this time, we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. This is the third and final reading. Seth is buying a third parcel. As you know, he bought a 4-acre parcel and then he bought a 2-acre parcel, and now he's buying this 1-acre parcel to get enough square footage to accommodate what he hopes to be is a 3 or 4 phase building, a very large building. And so to accommodate it, to accommodate his building and to comply with the floor area ratio, he's buying this additional lot. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
I don't have a question for Mr. Newton, but I do have a question for Mr. Godekin. And is he online?
Yes.
Looks like he is. Okay, so my question to Mr. Godekin, in this particular case, the purchaser has already bought previous lots as well as buying this last parcel as well. So my question really to you is, how much is it going to cost the city to install lot-specific underground drainage? I realize in his agreement, he's not responsible for any infrastructure that would be put by the city on his property. And I'm curious as to what an underground detention system that's in accordance with the new drainage criteria manual that you discussed with us at the prior meeting would cost, and how we would utilize our process to determine when and if that should occur. I guess what I don't understand, and maybe you can explain with regards to this purchase, even though he doesn't have to pay, when is the requirement of a landowner or a purchaser to come into play with regards to development and the purchase? Is it in the site development, the permitting? Is it in the platting? What stage do we need to deal with this? Even though recognizing the city will pay if you were to say, we're going to put in detention in these lots, his in particular in this 7th lot. What's the cost overall, and what's the process and procedure for us to know when to be doing that? If you could explain that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, right now, Dave Godekin, Director of Public Works. Right now, there is no requirement for them to put on-site detention system. And it would not be a city cost, or at least would not be my recommendation to bring that forward as a city cost. Any detention on a lot or requirement thereof would be at the developer's expense or at the lot owner's expense.
Councilman Yerger.
Okay, so I understood you to say going forward, we don't have a requirement to do this today, even though the criteria manual discussed with us last time said that this would be good and effective practice. You didn't really answer my question, the part of my question that says, well, where in the process do we do that? Even though, as I understood, the purchase agreements for this individual, no infrastructure that the city performs
On
would be
29th
at
Street.
his expense. And so this requirement, even for
On 29th Street.
On-
On 29th Street only.
just on 29th Street. So if detention cells were to be required for at least this purchase, not prior purchases, but for this purchase, he would have to pay.
Mhm.
And if we implemented a plan,
Mhm.
other lot purchasers, even though it's not in their contract, would have to pay. Then when in the city's process do we come up with the requirement for those to be required?
Well, if the drainage manual is approved, that would bring that process forward. So as you would develop a lot as a lot owner, at the time that you submitted building plans, construction plans, you would have to show that you have some form of site detention on your site with the drainage calculations showing, the sizing requirements that you came up with and the size that's on site.
Just like we've done with the tech park.
So
Yes.
part of the drainage plan. That's kind of what I thought from what I read in code. I just wasn't 100% confident that that's where it's at. And of course, the drainage plan then is part of the preparation for preliminary and final plating as well. So it comes in ahead of that. It's not at time of permit. It's ahead of the preliminary plating. It's a part of grading and drainage and all of that.
If you're
That
platting,
would be for publicly
if you're
owned.
platting, a lot of them wouldn't be platted.
No, but in this case, we're owning, and we have items on our agenda for the plating. So it would have been part of the city's development plan to identify that. And we have not yet, we have not.
Right.
And the only other things that I would continue, I've raised these before, but I truly don't understand why paragraphs 20 and 21 continue to be in here when we're not on 29th Street. And the applicant's legal counsel has said they don't intend to apply for TIF or LB 840. And if those are true and accurate, I don't know why they remain in the contract. I've raised the issue before. I'm still puzzled by the fact that those two things are in there when they don't apply.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public? I do have a member of Zoom.
Oh, it's Dave. Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, hello, am I on?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Dave Mitchell, appearing on behalf of McGinn Holdings, here to address any questions the council may have. In particular, the one that was just posed. We're purchasing all 7 lots as a unit. And so that's why the contingencies from our perspective, from a contractual perspective, remain the same with respect to all of the purchases. And while Seth has indicated that he doesn't have any intention at this point in time of pursuing any economic development, we don't necessarily want to absolutely rule it out. But at this point in time, he does not have any intention because it just doesn't cost out. When you do the LB 840 analysis, the jobs don't work out, and on a TIF basis, they don't really either, but what does it hurt? But in any event, this is all part of a uniform purchase, and that's why all the conditions are remaining the same.
Any questions for the applicant?
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Scott Euling, 1335 Glenwood Court here in Fremont. Just a couple comments on Mr. Yerger's comments there. From the city's point of view, on-site detention, I think is a good idea. It's a way for the lot owners to share the cost in this detention cell that we've been discussing now for the past month and a half. Requiring individual lot owners would require them to slow up the water on their lot. It would in effect slow up what the detention cell would be receiving. Therefore, the detention cell could potentially be smaller. So from the city standpoint, I think it's a win. They don't come without a cost to the developer, and I'm sure I would anticipate that you would receive pushback from the lot owners on this. However, it is a way to spread out the cost of the size of the detention cell that's required. One last thing is the cost of the lots as a small business owner. It's a pretty sweetheart of a deal that you are giving the lot owners. If you go on 26th Street, there is a half-acre lot, 0.58 acres. That's actually, I don't know exactly what it's zoned, but there is some light industrial buildings on there. That lot, you almost have to drive by it to get to the tech park. That lot is priced at $105,900. So having said that, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask landowners to share in the cost of the detention cell because of the cost, the initial cost that you're offering the lots to the business owners. Again, I'm a small business owner. I'm not opposed to the tech park or anyone who builds there. I'm just stating my thoughts on this individual detention cells. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? If there's none, I take a motion to hold final reading. Councilman Coons.
I'll make that motion on final reading.
Councilman Legband.
Second that.
Cast your votes.
I kind of jumped the gun there. I'm going to restart that vote. One moment.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Nebraska to McGinn Holdings LLC pursuant to Nebraska law on final reading.
Cast your final vote.
The vote is 7-0. The ordinance is approved.
Now moving on to new business. Item 17, motion to consent to appointment by the mayor to the Building Code and Advisory and Appeals Board of Gary Cerise. So I'll bring forward Gary as an appointment to this board. Would take any questions. Seeing none, are there any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
I'm curious on this particular application or appointment, who the person that's being replaced is. I don't think it said in our packet who this person was replacing. And the other notation that I made myself is I'm not familiar with the appointee. I'm not sure how and why he was selected in this case. That is, did he self-nominate or was he recruited? And I've kind of made this point before, I guess, Mayor, but it would really be great on these appointments if you would provide some sort of bio relative to these appointments, because we need to understand whether, the qualifications of these individuals, those kinds of things. And in certain instances, we may be interested in whether there are residency requirements, if they're extraterritorial appointments in some of these boards and commissions may not apply in this particular case. But it would be good information for us to have in advance to be acquainted with this, especially if the applicants or the appointees aren't attending our meeting to introduce themselves. And so if you could tell us a little bit about Gary tonight, because it wasn't in our packet, that would be great.
These are mayoral appointments. These are volunteers. This board meets once or twice a year. And I don't remember who Gary is replacing, but was willing to serve and volunteer his time for the city of Fremont, which I respected, and brings expertise into this area. So I bring forward Gary as an appointment on this board. Councilman Sukram.
I don't know Gary personally, but I do know he's a contractor here in Fremont. He's been around here for some time and would suit this board quite well. So with that, I would make a motion to approve Gary.
Councilman Coons.
And I'll second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Item 18, motion to consent to appointment by the mayor to the Utility and Infrastructure Board. I bring forward to this council Mr. Tad Dinkins. Tad volunteers his time throughout the community of Fremont, is a leader in our community, will serve this board very well. And I would take any questions in regards to Mr. Dinkins. Councilman Yerger.
Again, I don't personally know Mr. Dinkins, and I'd only like to raise one other comment with regards to your response to my previous question about providing more information about the applications. And you said they're mayoral appointments. And I guess I would point out, for purposes of the record, you appoint and the council has the responsibility to approve. And I think as a part of our responsibility to approve, we need to understand who the applicants or the appointments are. We shouldn't just be approving because you request. And I think that behooves us as council to make sure we know. And I really appreciate Mr. Sukram's additional comments as to who the prior applicant was. That was quite helpful to know that information, even though it was little. But when we don't know the applicants, it's really important, at least to me as a council member, to know whom I'm approving, even though you're appointing them.
Mr. Dinkins is here. Go ahead.
Good evening, Tad Dinkins, 1760 Deer Point Drive in Fremont. I've been a resident in Nebraska since 2013, Fremont 2014. I'm the manager of Butler Ag Equipment on the west side of town, sorry. Member of the Chamber of Commerce. I have a wife and 3 daughters, attend St. Pat's Parish since we moved here. Students at Bergen. My wife's a teacher at Bergen. Also current president of Fremont Area United Way, school board president, past president, now vice president. I think that about covers it quickly. Any other questions?
Councilman Yerger.
I'd just like to say thank you for coming and presenting yourself before council. That was much appreciated. Based on your bio, I should know you. And for that, I apologize.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? If not, none, I take a motion to approve Tad Dinkins to the Utility and Infrastructure Board. Councilman Coons.
I'll make the motion to approve that to the Utility and Infrastructure Board.
Councilman Yerger.
And I would second.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Item 19, a motion to consent to appointment by the mayor to the Planning Commission. Present Rosanna Yeager to the commission tonight. Rosanna has been involved in our community meetings, workshop meetings. She has works for the Fremont Area United Way. She will provide just a lot of good input and will be a great person on the planning commission. And she has a very willingness to serve this board. And I present Rosanna to you. She has come to the planning commission meeting last night, and I was in attendance, and is very excited to be able to join. And so I would take any questions. Councilman Gibson. Okay. Are there any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Coons.
Make a motion to approve the consent mayor's appointment to planning commission.
Councilman Sukram. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Item 21, motion to approve agreement with the Federal Aviation Administration for Airport Coronavirus Relief Grant Program. At this time, we'll have staff report.
Dave, you're up.
Dave, are you there?
I can do it too. He's unmuted. He must not be available. This is a requirement to get the coronavirus payment from the federal government. In fact, we have to have it into them by, it goes to Pat next. They have to have consent of the attorney. He has to have it in by, I think, Friday to get this. And so we really need to get this done. They had emailed it to us. They had a bad address, and so we didn't get it until just last week, right before the agenda, fortunately. And so this is the first tranche of money that we got for the coronavirus, specifically for the airport.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Sukram?
Nope, sorry.
Okay. Councilman Ellis?
Did we not get some money last summer for CARES or funding for?
I think this was the one that we got. We announced it last, whatever it was, we announced it. They're just doing the paperwork now.
Thought that one was a lot more. This is only 13,000.
Yeah, it's that same number.
Same number? Yeah. Okay. And it said personnel. We don't have a human resource personnel there. So really, how do we get the airport cleaned? Is that done by the contractor out there?
It's done by the contractor. So if you know, it's in my staff report, we can only use this for operations.
Yeah, so it's like a very limited,
but still something.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilman Coons.
Make a motion to approve the agreement with the FAA.
Councilman Legband.
I second that.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 22, resolution 2021-082, approving municipalities agreement with the Nebraska Department of Transportation for the Highway 275 Douglas County North project. This time we'll have staff report.
Dave Godican, Director of Public Works. This is an agreement with the Department of Transportation for, excuse me, a roadway improvement project that they're doing on Highway 75 from the Douglas County, Dodge County line north to Highway 30. And it just stipulates what Fremont's share of the cost will be on that and what our after costs responsibilities are.
Dave, you might want to say what year.
Oh, the bid opening on this one is scheduled for August of 22, construction most likely in 23.
It's a long time out.
Yes, this is a preliminary agreement that they like to
Any
do.
questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
In section 2.1.2, my questions are in that section, Mr. Godikin. That it has to, my first question is how much of Military and Morningside westbound will be involved in whatever work this project entails? Is it just really outside the entry exit ramps that does it go beyond that? The other question that I would have for you is, since we're now doing work apparently on those areas that are associated with the entry exit ramps, we've been talking for some time about the need to widen Military Street to something greater than what we have for the capacity that's on that street. Do we have any options now for the work that we're going to have to do, and I assume pay for, because this is urban expense? Do we have any leverage or accommodation with the state to do widening for a 4-lane consideration now so that we don't have to redo this in the future should we decide to pursue greater capacity on Military? Can we widen this to beyond what the state or what might be in the proposals now? Do we have to have permission, et cetera? So if you could answer those questions, I'd appreciate it.
The answer is yes, we would have to have permission. To go to a 4-lane there, you would have to also widen the bridges or the overpass over Highway 275. Now on Military, you said. Military, the bridge is a 3-lane cross section. You got east, 1 lane east, 1 lane west, and a turning lane down the center. I don't ever see Military out there in any time in the near future being anything more than a 3-lane, 1 lane each direction and a left-hand turn lane down the center, with the exception of at the major intersections, you might have to have deceleration lanes and that type of thing. You can get up to about 15,000 cars per day with the 3-lane, and I don't think we're anywhere near that right now. I would say you're less than 10 even, by quite a bit even. So, and our share on this, if you go to Exhibit B of that same agreement, our share or our responsibility is just for its ramps themselves. It's only for that portion of Military that leads up to the approach of the bridge. The rest is the state responsibility, as Exhibit B shows. So we're only contributing for that part of Military that leads up to the bridge or the approach to the bridge, not the ramps.
Okay, thank you for that response. I thought the public would be interested in knowing. I certainly was with all of the backup that's on Military during the school rush hour timeframes, especially on a daily basis on certain hours of the day. Widening of Military, I thought, was anticipated to perhaps be more than 3-lane, but your clarification that it's never going to be more than 3-lane is good information for the public to know for future consideration, since they sit in those backup rows all the time. So thank you for clarifying.
All right.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Legband?
If there are no more comments, I make a recommendation to approve resolution 2021-082.
Councilman Sukram?
I will second.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Item 23, motion authorizing the mayor to sign interlocal agreement for the Elkhorn Township Fremont East drainage improvements. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor and City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. Wow, it's taken a long time for this one. This was, believe it or not, this was one of the first reasons why we got the Joint Water Management Advisory Board together, is to work on drainage ditches. And it was one of the first projects we pursued. And initially, we're not successful in getting it. And you can see the county just kept going back to FEMA, and finally qualified for a hazard mitigation grant for $600,000, which is awesome because this is, again, as reported at the last meeting, this is the one step that we can control how the water gets out of Fremont. We're working on a grant to control how water gets into Fremont. And eventually, if we can get in our budget, our own plan, we will have a model built to be able to model exactly how stormwater passes, how it arrives, passes through and exits Fremont. So this is an awesome thing to do. You can see our share, we're sharing it with our normal partners, NRD in the county. Our share is 66.5 or 8%. So it's a pretty good deal. So remember, this doesn't fix anything. This is simply a study to take a look at and complete the design to get it done. It also, we amended the RFP out there. This will start building the model. And so we made sure we changed the RFP to say, hey, not only do you need to study and design this, but you have to start building the model that we're going to use to simulate floods as they hit Fremont. And so if we can get all three projects eventually awarded, build the model, we'll be able to actually simulate what happens, where the choke points are, some of the projects that need to be done first. So this is a huge, huge, huge big first step.
Councilman Sukram.
Oh, sorry.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
I don't have any real questions for the city administrator, but I do acknowledge that this is pretty major to the city. It has been problematic for a long time. And so I'm glad to see that there's actually action afoot to at least start to rectify the situations that we have in the city. So thank you for that.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I would probably rang in too soon. If council has other questions, great. Otherwise, I'm going to recommend approval. So we'll just, if I do, I'll wait.
Okay. Councilman Sukram, you are on? No. Okay.
Then I make the motion to approve.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0, Mayor.
Item 24, resolution 2021-083, authorizing the city administrator to sign a contract with Erickson Construction for 2021 wastewater treatment plant upgrades. This time we'll have staff report.
Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator, Utilities. Last April, the council approved an amendment to the HDR engineering project for the next phase of improvements to the wastewater treatment plant. HDR has been the engineer from the start of the phase 1 through the phase 2. That agreement said HDR was, or Holstone was responsible for half of the engineering costs. And then at that time, said that the estimated construction costs on the phase 2 would be in their share would be approximately $10 million. We took bids for the improvements last week. The original cost estimate was in the $20 million range. At the start of this year, everybody knows there were some substantial material cost increases. We were kind of nervous, I'll say, about what the bids were going to come in at. There have been a couple of similarly sized projects in the last 2 months that have come in the $8 million over budget range. So we were obviously hesitant. HDR actually recommended for the purposes for us to expect a bid in the 32-ish $1 million range. You can see from the bids, we got very, very good bids. They came in at $21.4 million for Erickson, who actually did the first phase of the plant improvements, and I would say did it very well. And then Hawkins came in $1 million, but pretty close to the first bid. So we are recommending awarding the improvement contract to Erickson. Typically, when we come in, we like to have the contract here, but this is such a large job. We haven't had time for legal to look it over. We're trying to get through as quickly as possible because the prices that Erickson submitted with the volatility in the materials market is really only good until the 1st of June. So we'd like to at least get, I'll say, an approval from council that in theory we are awarding the low bidder, awarding the job to the low bidder. What we'll do is we'll get the contract legal. We'll go through with Erickson's legal, and we'll get the contract, and we'll have to bring that back. And then also we have to go back to Holstone. We told them it would be in that $10 million range back in April of 2020. I don't suspect that number will change much. It'll still be in that $10 million range. So what we're asking is to have the council approve awarding the bid for the wastewater treatment plant improvements to Erickson. And then we will bring the contract back, and we will bring the executed cost share with Holstone back. The resolution and the staff report both reference authorized city administrator to sign a contract. I'd like to ask for that to be changed to something like authorize, or the city awards the bid to the low bidder of Erickson, if that makes sense. I can take any questions.
Councilman Yerger.
I guess I don't see exactly what you just explained with regards to the resolution associated with 2020-1083. It says you sought bids for the upgrades. Utility board recommends Erickson, and the final statement is we accept the recommendation of the utility board and award the contract with Erickson. That's the resolution I'm looking at. Am I looking at the wrong
first
thing?
line? I think the first line references authorizing city administrator to sign a contract with Erickson, very top.
Okay, and we don't have that yet, but I don't know whether legal has an issue specifically with that wording, and if he does, maybe we need to modify that. My question goes to this. We've done this previously. The $21 million 463 that is on the bid, that's not subject to change, right? I mean, that's going to be in the contract we get back.
That number is the official bid, and that'll be referenced in the contract.
Okay. And so then my other question is, typically, I think in other prior things we've had with Holstone, their contribution rate or participation rate is at a percentage of 63.63%. Is that what's applicable here?
It's based on load, it's based on flow. So the 6363 was for the sub G substation, and that was based on the percentage of the substation that they were going to use versus what we were going to use. In this case, flow for sanitary sewer is a lot harder to estimate because of the it's more efficient. They don't have a lot of their equipment in yet. We're still talking about 2 years down the line before any of this gets done. So it's all estimates. And so our original estimate was in that 55% of what the total capacity of the plant upgrades were due to them.
Okay. So thank you for clarifying that. One of the things that I wanted to do, which I think is important, and we've done it with all other aspects, I think, of the resolutions we've been passing for Holstone, and you made reference to it in your staff report, and that is Holstone will be contributing to this cost. But what you just told me is that it won't be at 6363. It's going to be at something else that we don't know of yet.
That number would be in the agreement that we're bringing back
Okay.
to.
So maybe my concern is premature at this time because I would have wanted to make a motion to include Holstone has agreed to reimburse the city to purchase the upgrades or contribute towards the purchase of the upgrades. And without the percentage, it might still be appropriate to use that language here. And you can fill in the percentage when we get back the final details. But we have specifically recognized in our resolutions their requirement to participate and contribute towards these projects that we're not signing off on $21 million. They're participating in it. And so I'd ask legal, since we don't know the percentage, or we don't know the amount, that's typically what we put in prior resolutions. Would my amendment to Holstone Farms has agreed to reimburse the city for a portion of the purchase of the upgrades be adequate for this portion? And then when they bring it back with detail, we can fill in the percent on the next item that comes back to council.
Councilman Yerger, I'm not seeing where you're referring to that in the resolution.
It's not in there. I'm asking to
Oh.
amend the resolution to include language like that. I would have recommended 6363 and an amount certain. But since staff has indicated that won't be the percent or the amount, the best we could put into this is recognition that of the $21 million, Holstone has agreed to reimburse the city for a portion of the purchase of the upgrades. That should be a given.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so I would motion to at least include that as a whereas statement here. And then when we get the final detail, as staff has indicated for the next item that comes back to council, we can fulfill our original form of doing the resolutions by adding the additional language as to the percent and the amount that they're contributing, because it's not specified with my amendment tonight. So I put my amendment on the table for consideration.
I don't have any problem with that, and I think it's a good spot as a whereas, and then I think both in the top of the resolution and in the actual bottom in the action taken to do, we can basically just say we're gonna award the low bid or the bid to Erickson Construction, subject to a contract. And the same thing at the bottom, the City of Fremont, accept the recommendation of the Utility Infrastructure Board approving the low bid of Erickson Construction, subject to a contract in that provision, subject to approval of the contract.
So you would make those recommendation amendments in addition to the
whereas,
statement, in addition to the
yes.
whereas statement that I offered as well.
Correct.
And when we come back, the cost share agreement is done with the resolution.
The cost share agreement is already existing. It just simply says, when we get this percentage figured out, we'll amend our first agreement and then bring the amendment back. So it's not a new agreement, it's just an amendment to an existing agreement.
Okay, I would amend my motion to add the whereas statement to include the recommendations of legal counsel with regards to the other paragraphs as stated onto the record.
Councilman Ellis.
I'm going to second that, but I got just a quick question. You mentioned 10 million that Holstel was going to be kind of on the hook for. Is that right? Is that what I heard? Somewhere in that ballpark.
Yep.
So financial impact, 21 million really isn't a good figure, because it's going to be 21 million minus what Holstone's going to kick in.
That's
Correct.
Correct?
21 million is the bid.
So our physical impact would be more like 11 million.
It'll be whatever it is. Yeah, minus the
Whatever.
10, minus the
Ballpark
number
figure.
that the flow shows that they end up paying.
Okay,
a
it's just
percentage.
big numbers. I want to make
Yep.
sure we understand what's going on. I second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion to amend is approved.
I would take a motion in regards to amended resolution 2021-083. Councilman Ellis.
I still have one question. So this was phase 2 of the improvements out at the wastewater treatment plant. Phase 1 was I mean, I'm going off my memory here. Was that like $11 million?
That was like 30 or $40 million
much?
with a contribution back. That was due to the ammonia upgrades.
Okay.
So what happened was our ammonia limits basically got cut by 90%. We had to add aeration.
Sure.
And at that same time, Costco came in. And the cost to incorporate Costco's improvements into our improvements that we would have done had Costco come or not was, I mean, nil. It was, in the $3-4 million compared to they would have paid $25 million, because it's really, instead of building, a house for us and a house for them, we built a house and we pushed the wall out 5 feet to make capacity for them. So when they came in, that $30 million, their contribution to it also helped drop that. That was a mandate based on our ammonia limits. And the total for that was if you include the lagoons, which we also got 5 million from Costco and 5 million from Hormel.
Yep.
So of that 40, 10 was directly paid into the lagoons. And the advantage of those lagoons, then I can stand here and talk for an hour about the advantages of what that did, but basically it saves the city a $15 million upgrade on our outfall sewer to the plant. It pushes that off probably 30 years, because that high load flow that was going down Morningside in a 24 and a 27-inch concrete pipe, the sulfide gases eat away that concrete, and that pipe was collapsing. So by getting that high load effluent out of those concrete pipes and into a plastic force main, it stops the degradation of the concrete pipe and leaves it in a low flow residential or domestic flow is what we call it. And so the lifespan of those pipes was probably extended 20 years. In addition, those pipes were probably flowing 85-90% at the time. Now they're 30-40%. So we've got additional capacity in that Morningside outfall as well. Not to mention the gas we're producing from the effluent, the equalized flow, the equalized loadings. Before all that happened, our flow would come through in huge waves in the morning, huge waves in the afternoon. Now it comes in, it goes into those lagoons. It sits there for 4 days. It acts kind of like a detention basin for the storm sewer guys that are in here. It acts like a detention basin. It comes in really fast. It lets out slow. It allows them to run the plant a lot more efficiently. So that was a big number, but the advantages to the city for that was a no-brainer, really.
So phase one, we had 40,000, 10 for the lagoons, and those are 5 and 5 each from the two industries. So that left 30. Out of that 30, how much did the city pay and how much did Costco pay?
Well, Costco paid 4 for the outfalls. Costco paid 2 to us. Like I said, we were paying that 30 million anyway. And so they probably paid, of the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, they probably paid 2 of the 30, but that was based on what their take would be of that 30. The rest of it we were doing for ammonia limits. The city prior to Costco has typically never charged for capacity. And when Costco came in, we had capacity. We didn't really have to do much of an upgrade to accommodate them. Our clarifiers were sized correctly. Our UV system was sized correctly. Our headworks building was sized correctly. Really, all we had to do was add aeration, which we were doing for part of our ammonia project anyway. And so their overall contribution to the first phase as far as flow and loadings was, I don't want to say minimal, but it didn't require a lot of additional capacity that we put in. This is different because this requires a completely new aeration to be put in. It requires all new blowers. It requires a new processing section. It requires a new clarifier. There's a lot of extra work here for the whole stone upgrade than there was for the Costco. And that's why their contribution is a lot more, is because their they're causing a lot more of the upgrades to happen than Costco did. I don't know how to say it other than Costco came in at a perfect time when we had capacity, and Holstone came in a month after we were done with that other project. Had Holstone come in 18 months earlier, they probably their 10 million probably could have been 2 also. You know, a lot of it's timing.
Okay. I make a motion to on resolution 2021-83.
There'd be a second, right? Or we're on the amended.
We already approved the amendment. This
We-
is the approval.
Okay.
As amended.
Okay, as amended, okay. Is there a second? Councilwoman Ganem,
Second,
cast your votes.
The motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Gibson,
So moved.
Councilman Sukram,
Get,
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-0.
We are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.